Expressionism, the emotional and psychological impact of art, written by High Event, narrated by Kara Miller. Chapter 1, Introduction to Expressionism. Expressionism is a powerful and transformative movement in art that emphasizes the expression of emotional and psychological experience over the accurate representation of the external world. Emerging in the early 20th century, Expressionism arose as a reaction against the rationalism and order of previous artistic traditions, particularly during a time of intense societal change, industrialization, and political upheaval. Artists sought to capture raw emotion, personal perception, and the turmoil of modern life rather than focusing on realistic depictions. This movement profoundly shaped a range of creative disciplines, including visual arts, literature, theater, and cinema. At its core, Expressionism is defined by its intense focus on inner experience, often portraying feelings of alienation, anxiety, despair, and existential crisis. Artists sought to convey their subjective emotional realities, exploring the psychological depths of the human experience. In visual arts, this often translated into distorted forms, exaggerated colors, and dynamic compositions that evoked strong emotional responses. The works were not meant to mirror reality, but to express the distorted truths of the artist's inner world. This made Expressionism deeply personal and individualistic, as it drew on the artist's own emotional state to communicate universal themes. Historically, Expressionism found its roots in Germany in the early 1900s, particularly in the works of groups such as Die Brücke, The Bridge, and Der Blaue Reiter, The Blue Rider. These groups were composed of artists who rejected the conventional and embraced new ways of representing the human experience. They sought to break free from traditional forms of beauty and perspective, aiming to capture not only the external world, but also the inner struggles and emotional states that define human existence. The movement was shaped by a reaction to the industrial age's dehumanizing effects, the horror of war, and a growing sense of disillusionment with society. While Expressionism is often associated with artists like Edvard Munch, Ernst Ludwig Kirchner, and Wassily Kandinsky, it extended beyond visual art to influence literature and theater. Writers such as Franz Kafka and playwrights like August Strindberg incorporated expressionist ideas into their works, which often explored themes of alienation, isolation, and psychological turmoil. Similarly, Expressionism influenced the development of cinema, especially in German cinema, where directors employed dramatic lighting and distorted set designs to create a sense of psychological tension. Ultimately, Expressionism was not merely an artistic style, but a philosophical and emotional movement. It offered a space for artists to confront personal and collective crises, providing insight into the turbulent emotional landscape of the modern world. Expressionism's focus on raw emotion and psychological depth continues to resonate, making it a significant part of the artistic legacy that shapes how we understand art's role in conveying human experience. Definition of Expressionism. Expressionism is an artistic movement that seeks to convey the emotional experience of the artist rather than an objective depiction of the external world. It is characterized by a focus on subjective emotions, distorted perspectives, and bold, often exaggerated visual elements that express the internal states of the artist. Emerging in the early 20th century, Expressionism grew in response to the rapid changes of modern life, such as industrialization, urbanization, and the aftermath of war. In its essence, Expressionism is less concerned with the accurate representation of reality and more interested in conveying how the world is perceived through the emotional and psychological lens of the artist. In visual arts, Expressionism is marked by vivid colors, distorted forms, and dramatic lines that aim to evoke powerful emotional responses from the viewer. Unlike realism, which attempts to faithfully represent the external world, Expressionist art distorts its subjects, to reflect the inner turmoil, anxiety, and alienation felt by individuals. This distortion is not meant to mislead, but to communicate the heightened emotions of the human experience. Expressionism often portrays themes of existential struggle, inner conflict, and societal breakdown, which were particularly relevant during times of war and social upheaval. While it is most strongly associated with painting, Expressionism extended its reach to other art forms, including literature, theater, and film. In literature, the movement's influence can be seen in the works of authors such as Franz Kafka, whose stories explore feelings of alienation, helplessness, and existential dread. Expressionism in theater, particularly in Germany, aimed to depict the internal psychological states of characters, often using unconventional staging, exaggerated performances, and symbolic sets. This same approach was adopted in German expressionist cinema, where directors like F.W. Murnau and Fritz Lang used chiaroscuro lighting and distorted sets to evoke a sense of heightened psychological tension. At its core, Expressionism is not just an artistic style, but a response to the human condition. It sought to engage with the emotions and psychological states that shape our understanding of the world, giving a voice to the often unspoken anxieties, fears, and desires that reside within us. By exaggerating and distorting the familiar, Expressionism opened up new ways of interpreting both personal and collective experiences, allowing artists and audiences to explore the complexities of human emotion. As such, Expressionism remains a powerful and relevant force in the exploration of art and psychology today. Historical origins and development. Expressionism emerged in the early 20th century as a response to the dramatic societal and cultural changes brought about by industrialization, urbanization, and the horrors of war. The movement found its roots in Germany, where it grew out of the tumultuous climate of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The rapid transformation of European society during this period, marked by technological advancements, the rise of modern cities, and the increasing alienation of the individual, created an atmosphere of anxiety and disillusionment. As a result, artists sought a way to break free from traditional artistic conventions and represent the emotional and psychological experiences that accompanied these societal shifts. Expressionism began to take shape around 1905 with the formation of key groups such as Die Brücke, the bridge, and Der Blaue Reiter, the Blue Rider. Die Brücke, founded by a group of young artists in Dresden, was an early expressionist collective that sought to forge a new path in art, embracing spontaneity, vivid color, and dynamic forms. The group rejected the academic art tradition and instead sought to represent raw emotion and individual perception. Members of Die Brücke, including Ernst Ludwig Kirchner, Erich Heckel, and Carl Schmidt-Rottluff, often portrayed urban life with an emphasis on the alienation and anxiety that accompanied modernity. Meanwhile, Der Blaue Reiter, a group formed in Munich in 1911, focused on spiritual and symbolic aspects of expressionism. Led by artists such as Wassily Kandinsky, Franz Marc, and Paul Klee, Der Blaue Reiter sought to explore the emotional and metaphysical dimensions of art, believing that color and form could express deeper truths beyond the visible world. Kandinsky, in particular, became a key figure in the development of abstract art, moving toward non-representational works that aimed to convey pure emotion through color and form. As the movement evolved, Expressionism spread across Europe and influenced other art forms, including literature, theater, and cinema. Writers like Franz Kafka and playwrights such as Georg Kaiser adopted expressionist ideas to explore themes of alienation, existential crisis, and the inner workings of the human psyche. In cinema, German expressionism gained prominence with films like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, 1920, and Nosferatu, 1922, which employed distorted sets, exaggerated shadows, and unsettling imagery to reflect psychological tension and anxiety. The development of expressionism was, in many ways, a reaction to the turbulent social and political climate of the time. The movement's intense emotionalism and distorted representations of reality provided an avenue for artists to confront the alienation and trauma of the modern age. Despite its initial decline in the late 1920s, Expressionism's impact on subsequent art movements, such as abstract expressionism and surrealism, ensured its lasting influence in the history of modern art. Key figures and movements. Expressionism, as a movement, was shaped by a variety of artists, writers, and thinkers who sought to push the boundaries of conventional art to express emotional depth and psychological states. Among the key figures in the movement, several stand out for their groundbreaking contributions to Expressionism across different disciplines. In visual arts, the German painter Edvard Munch is often considered a precursor to Expressionism, with his iconic work, The Scream, 1893, which vividly captures the existential anxiety and inner turmoil that would become central themes in the movement. His distorted figures and use of dramatic color would greatly influence later Expressionists. Ernst Ludwig Kirchner, one of the founding members of the Die Brücke, the Bridge group, is often seen as a pivotal figure in Expressionism. His bold, angular compositions and focus on urban alienation helped define the movement's visual language. Kirchner's work depicted the tension and fragmentation of modern life, often portraying figures caught in an emotional or existential struggle. Another key figure in Die Brücke was Carl Schmidt-Rottluff, whose works combined vivid colors and jagged lines to evoke raw emotional responses. Meanwhile, the Der Blaue Reiter, the Blue Rider group, founded in Munich, focused on a more spiritual and abstract approach to Expressionism. Wassily Kandinsky, one of the movement's most influential figures, believed that art should transcend the material world and convey the emotional and spiritual essence of the artist. His abstract works, which rejected figurative representation in favor of colors and shapes as pure emotional expression, laid the groundwork for the development of abstract art. Alongside Kandinsky was Franz Marc, who used vivid colors and bold forms to depict the inner lives of animals and the natural world, focusing on spiritual harmony and the deep connection between humans and nature. In literature, Franz Kafka's works, such as The Trial and The Metamorphosis, are quintessential examples of Expressionism. His exploration of alienation, bureaucracy, and the existential plight of the individual placed him at the heart of the literary movement. Expressionism also found expression in theater, with playwrights like Georg Kaiser and August Strindberg utilizing exaggerated symbolic settings and dialogue to depict the inner turmoil of characters struggling with existential questions. In cinema, German Expressionism had a profound impact, with directors like F.W. Murnau and Fritz Lang leading the way. Films like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, 1920, and Metropolis, 1927, used distorted sets, dramatic lighting, and shadow play to create a sense of psychological unease, reflecting the growing sense of anxiety in post-World War I society. These key figures and movements not only defined the course of Expressionism, but also laid the foundation for future artistic exploration, influencing later developments in abstract art, surrealism, and film. Through their radical departure from realism and commitment to portraying emotional truths, they reshaped the artistic landscape and left a lasting legacy. Expressionism's influence on art, literature, and film. Expressionism's influence extended far beyond its origins in painting and deeply permeated the realms of literature and film, shaping the artistic landscape in ways that continue to resonate today. The movement, with its focus on emotional intensity, subjective perception, and psychological depth, provided new avenues for exploring the complexities of the human condition in all forms of art. In visual art, Expressionism marked a radical departure from the precise realism that had dominated previous centuries. It inspired painters to move away from representing the world as it appeared, embracing bold colors, distorted forms, and dramatic brushstrokes to express the artist's inner emotional world. Artists like Edvard Munch, Ernst Ludwig Kirchner, and Wassily Kandinsky used these techniques to convey feelings of anxiety, alienation, and the search for meaning in a rapidly changing society. Kandinsky, for instance, pushed the boundaries of abstraction, believing that color and form could evoke deeper emotional and spiritual truths. This influence of Expressionism on the visual arts paved the way for later movements like abstract expressionism, where artists such as Jackson Pollock continued to explore emotional expression through abstraction. Expressionism also had a profound impact on literature, particularly in works that delved into the psychological struggles of characters and the alienation of individuals in modern society. Writers like Franz Kafka embodied the essence of literary expressionism, with his surreal and often nightmarish portrayals of bureaucratic oppression, isolation, and existential anxiety. His works, including The Trial and The Metamorphosis, reflect the movement's focus on portraying the disintegration of the self and the confusion of the modern world. Similarly, playwrights such as Georg Kaiser and August Strindberg used expressionist techniques to explore the internal conflicts and emotional distress of their characters, often employing symbolic sets and fragmented dialogue to mirror the instability of the human psyche. In cinema, Expressionism found a particularly powerful medium for its exploration of psychological tension and emotional extremes. German expressionist filmmakers in the 1920s, such as F.W. Murnau and Fritz Lang, employed distorted sets, stark lighting contrasts, and surreal visuals to evoke a sense of psychological unrest. Films like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari and Nosferatu introduced cinematic techniques that intensified the emotional experience, blurring the line between reality and perception. The use of exaggerated angles, shadow play, and abstract settings reflected the movement's focus on the interior world of the characters, giving film a new language to explore the subconscious. The influence of German expressionist cinema can still be seen today in the works of directors like Tim Burton and David Lynch, who use similar visual styles to evoke psychological and emotional depth. In each of these disciplines, Expressionism encouraged an exploration of the self and its struggles in a rapidly changing world. It introduced new ways of thinking about art, emphasizing the subjective experience over objective reality, and its legacy continues to shape contemporary artistic expressions. Psychological and emotional dimensions of Expressionism. At the heart of Expressionism lies a profound focus on the psychological and emotional experiences of both the artist and the viewer. Unlike earlier art movements that aimed to represent the world with precision and realism, Expressionism prioritized the inner emotional world, seeking to capture the turmoil, desires, fears, and existential struggles of individuals. The movement's emphasis on subjective perception allows it to delve deep into the complexities of human psychology, transforming art into a means of psychological exploration. The psychological dimension of Expressionism is closely tied to the distorted representations of reality often found in the artwork. Rather than adhering to traditional perspectives, Expressionist artists intentionally warped form, exaggerated color, and manipulated space to evoke powerful emotional responses. This distortion was not an error or lack of skill, but rather a deliberate attempt to reflect the inner experiences of the human mind, whether that was anxiety, alienation, or ecstasy. Through these techniques, Expressionism gave a visual language to feelings and emotions that were often difficult to articulate, portraying the chaos and fragmentation of modern life. Artists like Edvard Munch and Ernst Ludwig Kirchner conveyed a sense of psychological distress through jagged lines, distorted figures, and heightened color contrasts, inviting the viewer into the emotional states of the subjects portrayed. On an emotional level, Expressionism captures the intensity of human feelings, often focusing on the darker aspects of existence. The alienation of the individual, the terror of modern life, and the fear of an uncertain future are recurring themes in Expressionist art, literature, and film. Works such as Munch's The Scream or Kafka's The Trial reflect the inner turmoil of characters trapped in existential crises, unable to find meaning or resolution in their lives. Expressionism's emotional depth also explores the tension between the individual and society. The feeling of isolation, amplified by the rapid industrialization and urbanization of the early 20th century, emerges as a central theme, portraying individuals who struggle to connect with others or find their place in a fragmented world. In addition, Expressionism addresses emotional extremes, where intense feelings such as fear, guilt, and desire are portrayed as powerful forces that shape the psyche. It reveals the rawness of human emotion in a way that was often too disturbing for more traditional forms of art. This exploration of heightened emotional states opened new avenues for art to act as a reflection of the unconscious mind, tapping into the psychological tensions that govern human behavior. It also laid the groundwork for modern psychological theory, providing insights into the inner workings of the human mind. Overall, the psychological and emotional dimensions of Expressionism highlight its ability to transcend mere visual representation and become a tool for exploring the deeper aspects of the human condition. Through its distorted depictions of reality, Expressionism presents a unique opportunity to witness the inner lives of individuals in crisis, making it a movement that continues to resonate on both an emotional and intellectual level. Chapter 2: The Emotional Core of Expressionism. At the heart of Expressionism lies a deep engagement with the emotional experiences that define human existence. Unlike traditional artistic movements that sought to represent reality with accuracy and objectivity, Expressionism places emotions at the forefront, creating a direct link between art and the artist's inner world. The movement explores a wide spectrum of emotions, particularly those that are intense, raw, and often difficult to express in words. It is through this emphasis on emotion that Expressionism reveals the complexities of the human condition, inviting viewers to connect with feelings of alienation, anxiety, despair, and even joy. In Expressionist art, emotions are not merely depicted, they are the driving force behind the composition. Artists use a variety of techniques to convey the emotional intensity of their subjects, including exaggerated forms, bold colors, and distorted perspectives. For example, vivid and sometimes unnatural color choices are often used to heighten emotional impact, with red or yellow frequently symbolizing intensity, violence, or passion. The distortion of figures and landscapes is another technique that reflects the emotional states of the subjects. In works by artists like Edvard Munch and Ernst Ludwig Kirchner, figures are warped or elongated to communicate psychological distress, creating a visual language that bypasses intellectual interpretation and directly engages with the viewer's emotions. One of the central themes of Expressionism is the portrayal of existential angst, a feeling of alienation and confusion in an increasingly industrialized and mechanized world. The emotional turmoil of the individual is expressed not through literal representations, but through the abstraction of reality. The fragmented and chaotic nature of the world depicted in many expressionist works mirrors the fragmentation of the self, as individuals struggle to find meaning and connection in a world that feels both oppressive and alienating. This is particularly evident in Munch's The Scream, where the figure's open mouth and contorted expression convey a sense of overwhelming fear and despair, symbolizing the human struggle to cope with the existential uncertainties of life. Furthermore, Expressionism also explores emotions such as love, joy, and spiritual transcendence, though often in a more complex, layered form. The intensity of these positive emotions is similarly heightened, offering an alternative view of the human experience. Expressionists sought to break through conventional representations of beauty and harmony to present a more visceral, unfiltered view of the emotional spectrum. In this way, the emotional core of Expressionism reveals both the beauty and the anguish of being human, offering an honest, raw exploration of the depths of human feeling. Ultimately, the emotional core of Expressionism is its most defining characteristic. By placing emotional experience at the center of artistic expression, the movement transcended surface-level representation, encouraging viewers to confront their own emotions and experiences. Through the raw power of distorted form and intense color, Expressionism invites us into the tumultuous inner world of the artist, where emotion takes precedence over realism, offering a glimpse into the heart of human existence. Understanding emotions in art. Understanding emotions in art is central to the power of Expressionism, as the movement actively sought to transcend the mere depiction of the external world, focusing instead on the artist's inner emotional landscape. Expressionism challenged the traditional boundaries of representation, encouraging both artists and viewers to confront emotions in their rawest, most unfiltered form. Rather than using art to recreate the world as it is seen with the eye, Expressionist artists aim to express how the world feels, capturing complex psychological states and visceral emotions. The result was not just visual art, but an emotional experience that could resonate deeply with viewers, allowing them to engage with emotions often too overwhelming or complex to articulate in words. One of the fundamental aspects of understanding emotions in expressionist art is recognizing the deliberate use of distortion and abstraction. By manipulating form, color, and perspective, Expressionist artists created works that evoke emotional responses far beyond what a realistic portrayal might achieve. The distorted shapes and exaggerated figures convey the emotional depth of the subject, with every brushstroke or color choice laden with meaning. For instance, in Edvard Munch's The Scream, the swirling, distorted lines surrounding the central figure amplify the feeling of dread and anxiety. The figure's expression, its open mouth, wide eyes, and outstretched hands, seems to emanate with a sense of psychological and existential panic, allowing the viewer to feel the terror in a way that realism could not communicate. Colors, too, play an essential role in expressing emotions in art. Expressionists frequently used vibrant, non-naturalistic color schemes to mirror the intensity of their inner states. Bright reds and oranges might signify anger or passion, while cool blues and greens could evoke melancholy or isolation. This departure from naturalistic colors allowed for a much broader emotional palette, with each color choice serving as an emotional shorthand for the artist's mental and emotional landscape. The emotional depth of Expressionism also lies in its ability to communicate complex psychological states that are often difficult to verbalize. Themes of alienation, loneliness, fear, and internal conflict are prevalent as artists grapple with the anxiety brought on by rapid societal changes, such as industrialization and war. Expressionism brings these struggles to the surface, providing a visual language for the hidden emotional lives of individuals. Through exaggerated lines, jagged forms, and distorted spaces, these feelings of inner turmoil are made tangible. Ultimately, understanding emotions in art, particularly in Expressionism, requires an openness to the emotional truth that art can reveal. It is not about recognizing a perfect likeness or interpreting a clear narrative, but about feeling the emotional currents that flow beneath the surface. By engaging with the emotional intensity in Expressionist works, viewers are invited to not only understand the artist's emotional experience, but to reflect on their own emotional truths. Art, in this sense, becomes a shared space for confronting and understanding the complex spectrum of human emotion. Color, form, and line, tools of emotional expression. In Expressionism, color, form, and line are not mere aesthetic choices. They are powerful tools used to communicate the depth and complexity of emotional and psychological states. These elements work together to create a visual language that bypasses rational thought and directly engages the viewer's emotions. By manipulating these tools, Expressionist artists conveyed a sense of urgency, tension, and unease, enabling them to express internal experiences that words alone could not encapsulate. Color is one of the most immediate and evocative tools of emotional expression in art. In Expressionism, color often moves beyond naturalistic representation to take on psychological significance. Bold, intense colors are used to evoke specific feelings and moods, For instance, red can signify passion, anger, or violence, while blue might represent melancholy, sadness, or isolation. The exaggerated use of color intensifies the emotional impact of a piece, giving it an almost visceral quality. In Edvard Munch's The Scream, the fiery orange sky surrounding the central figure amplifies the sense of existential dread and psychological turmoil, while the swirling lines evoke a sense of chaos. Colors are not just background elements in Expressionism, they are active participants in shaping the emotional atmosphere of the artwork. Form in Expressionist art is equally important in conveying emotion. Artists often distort forms, exaggerating proportions, or elongating figures to express internal states. This manipulation of form creates a sense of dissonance, which reflects the emotional fragmentation experienced by individuals in a rapidly changing modern world. In works by artists like Ernst Ludwig Kirchner, figures are often depicted with sharp angles and exaggerated limbs, symbolizing anxiety, alienation, or distress. The distortion of the human body, in particular, emphasizes the emotional vulnerability and inner turmoil of the subject. By bending reality in such a way, Expressionism highlights the gap between outward appearances and inner emotional realities. Line also plays a crucial role in the emotional language of Expressionism. Whether thick and jagged or thin and sweeping, lines can carry emotional weight, representing everything from tension and anxiety to movement and agitation. The aggressive use of harsh, angular lines conveys a sense of unease, while softer, curving lines might evoke a feeling of introspection or melancholy. In works like those of German expressionist artist Egon Schiele, raw, jagged lines are often used to depict figures in contorted, vulnerable poses, reinforcing the sense of psychological strain and emotional rawness. Together, color, form, and line become vehicles for communicating the emotional essence of a work. They allow the viewer to experience the artist's emotional state in a direct and intuitive way. In Expressionism, these tools are not about creating aesthetically pleasing representations of the world, but rather about capturing the emotional truth of human experience, one that is often messy, chaotic, and deeply felt. Through these elements, Expressionist artists invite viewers to feel as much as they see, drawing them into a deeper understanding of both the artwork and the emotions it seeks to express. The role of the artist's inner world. In Expressionism, the artist's inner world is not only central to the creation of the artwork, but it is often considered the primary subject matter. Unlike previous art movements that focused on external reality, Expressionism prioritizes the subjective experience, positioning the artist's emotions, thoughts, and psychological states as the focal point of the artistic process. This shift marks a significant departure from the idea that art should reflect the external world with accuracy and precision. Instead, Expressionists believed that the inner, emotional world of the artist could serve as a truer and more powerful form of expression, one that speaks directly to the viewer's own emotions. For Expressionist artists, the external world was not enough to communicate the depth of human experience. It was seen as too static, too constrained by social conventions and traditional aesthetic values. By turning inward, the artist tapped into an emotional and psychological landscape that was dynamic, raw, and unfiltered. The artist's personal struggles, anxieties, desires, and fears became the foundation for the work, with the process of creation acting as a catharsis or a form of self-exploration. This internal dialogue between the artist and their emotions allowed them to create works that were intensely personal yet universal in their ability to speak to the shared human condition. This focus on the inner world is evident in the ways Expressionist artists manipulate form, color, and line. The chaotic use of color, the distortion of figures, and the exaggerated proportions are not arbitrary choices, but are direct expressions of the artist's psychological state. For instance, in Edvard Munch's The Scream, the swirling lines and vivid, unnatural colors reflect Munch's own personal anguish and fear, yet they also resonate with the viewer's sense of existential anxiety. In this way, the artist's inner turmoil becomes not just a personal statement, but an invitation for others to reflect on their own emotional experiences. Moreover, the role of the artist's inner world in Expressionism is not confined to visual art alone. In literature and theater, the inner psyche of characters is explored with similar intensity. Writers like Franz Kafka and playwrights like Georg Kaiser portrayed individuals struggling with isolation, alienation, and existential uncertainty. The inner lives of their characters were fragmented, torn between reality and perception, mirroring the psychological disintegration that many expressionist artists experienced in their own lives. Ultimately, the role of the artist's inner world in Expressionism is to create an art that transcends the surface of things, one that reaches into the very core of what it means to be human. By using personal emotion and inner experience as the driving forces behind their work, Expressionist artists invite viewers to confront their own emotional realities, creating a powerful connection between the artist and the audience. The art of Expressionism, therefore, becomes a shared space where personal and collective emotions can be explored, understood, and in some cases, healed. Expressionism and the human condition. At its core, Expressionism is a profound exploration of the human condition, delving deep into the complexities of human existence, emotions, and psychological states. Unlike art movements that sought to depict the world with realism or idealism, Expressionism aimed to express the raw, often tumultuous nature of human life. The movement's focus on subjective experience allowed artists to confront themes of alienation, fear, anxiety, and the search for meaning, capturing the profound emotional truths of being human. Expressionism, therefore, becomes not just an artistic style, but a lens through which to understand the struggles, desires, and internal conflicts that define the human experience. One of the central concerns of Expressionism is the alienation of the individual. As modernity brought about rapid industrialization, urbanization, and the breakdown of traditional social structures, many individuals felt disconnected from their surroundings and from each other. This sense of isolation, both physical and emotional, became a recurring theme in Expressionist art, literature, and theater. Artists like Edvard Munch and Ernst Ludwig Kirchner captured this alienation through distorted figures and fragmented landscapes, evoking a world in which individuals are lost, overwhelmed, and estranged from the very society they inhabit. The human figure often appears out of place or distorted, mirroring the fractured sense of self that many people felt during this time. Expressionism also addresses the inner turmoil and psychological distress that so often accompany the human condition. Themes of anxiety, fear, and existential dread are central to many Expressionist works. The subjective portrayal of these emotions, often through exaggerated colors, forms, and lines, gives them a visceral quality that makes the viewer feel the intensity of the artist's psychological state. Works like Munch's The Scream or Kafka's The Trial depict characters caught in a world of confusion, fear, and overwhelming emotion, unable to find solace or understanding. These works reflect the existential uncertainty that many people faced in an increasingly fragmented and complex world, where traditional meanings and certainties were being dismantled. Despite its focus on dark and uncomfortable emotions, Expressionism also offers a window into the search for meaning and spiritual transcendence. Some Expressionist artists, such as Wassily Kandinsky, believed that art could express a higher, more universal truth, one that transcended the chaos and confusion of everyday life. Through abstraction and the use of symbolic colors and forms, they sought to convey not only the pain of human existence, but also the potential for inner growth, connection, and understanding. Ultimately, Expressionism provides a powerful commentary on the human condition, capturing the emotional depth and complexity of life. It forces us to confront the darker aspects of existence, alienation, anxiety, and despair, while also offering a space to explore the deeper emotional and spiritual dimensions of the self. Through its intense emotional expression, Expressionism invites both artists and viewers to engage with the fundamental questions of what it means to be human. Chapter 3: Psychological Impact of Expressionist Art. The psychological impact of expressionist art is one of the most striking and profound aspects of the movement. By prioritizing emotional intensity over realistic representation, expressionist artists created works that not only reflected the inner workings of the human psyche, but also had the power to influence the viewer's emotions and thoughts. The deliberate use of distortion, vibrant colors, and exaggerated forms sought to tap into the subconscious mind, evoking feelings of anxiety, confusion, fear, and even exhilaration. Expressionism did not just aim to present a visual image. It aimed to evoke an emotional and psychological experience that would resonate deeply with the viewer. The distorted, often unsettling imagery found in expressionist art has a direct psychological effect, as it disrupts the viewer's sense of reality and forces them to confront emotions that are not often represented in traditional art. Figures in expressionist works are frequently contorted or exaggerated, as seen in Edvard Munch's The Scream or Egon Schiele's portraits. These exaggerated forms communicate a sense of internal struggle, alienation, and emotional turmoil, creating an uncanny experience that can be both disorienting and cathartic. The emotional impact of such works often leads the viewer to reflect on their own psychological states, particularly those feelings of fear, confusion, or isolation that are universally understood but often left unspoken. Color, as a tool of emotional expression, also plays a vital role in the psychological impact of expressionist art. Bold, unnatural colors intensify the emotional atmosphere, creating an immediate psychological reaction. For example, in Munch's works, the use of fiery reds and oranges in the background of The Scream amplifies the sense of dread and existential anxiety, heightening the emotional tension of the scene. The colors themselves seem to pulsate with psychological energy, giving the painting an almost visceral quality that can stir deep, unconscious emotions in the viewer. This manipulation of color enhances the viewer's emotional engagement with the artwork, drawing them into the psychological experience being depicted. The psychological impact of Expressionism extends beyond the individual pieces of art themselves. It is embedded in the movement's very ethos. Expressionism, at its core, seeks to explore the depths of human emotion, revealing the complexities of the psyche, and inviting both artist and viewer into a shared space of emotional vulnerability. The emotional extremes conveyed in these works open up a space for introspection and self-examination, allowing the viewer to confront their own hidden fears, desires, and anxieties. For many, the raw intensity of Expressionism is both a challenge and a catharsis, as it confronts them with uncomfortable truths about the darker aspects of human existence. In psychological terms, Expressionism serves as a form of emotional release or purging, offering a means for both the artist and the viewer to express and process complex feelings. This cathartic experience can have lasting emotional effects, allowing individuals to confront difficult emotions and, in some cases, gain a deeper understanding of their own psychological makeup. Expressionist art, therefore, serves as not just a mirror to society, but also a profound exploration of the internal, often turbulent world that lies beneath the surface of our everyday lives. Art therapy and Expressionism. Art therapy has long been recognized as a powerful tool for emotional healing and self-exploration, and Expressionism, with its focus on raw, unfiltered emotional expression, offers a particularly rich foundation for therapeutic practices. Rooted in the idea that art can transcend verbal communication, art therapy provides individuals with the opportunity to explore and externalize their innermost feelings, traumas, and conflicts. Expressionism, with its emphasis on distorted forms, intense color, and psychological intensity, encourages a direct engagement with the emotional core of the self, making it an ideal approach in therapeutic settings where the goal is to access deep emotional states and facilitate healing. The therapeutic potential of expressionist art lies in its ability to bypass intellectual defenses and allow the unconscious mind to surface. In traditional talk therapy, individuals may struggle to articulate their feelings or may feel constrained by the need to communicate within social or cultural norms. Art, however, offers an alternative means of expression that transcends language. The freedom to use color, form, and texture to represent emotions can be particularly liberating for individuals who find it difficult to express their inner worlds verbally. By channeling emotions into tangible, visual forms, clients can confront and process their psychological states in a nonverbal way. The distorted figures, vibrant colors, and abstract forms commonly found in expressionist art provide a safe space to externalize complex or hidden emotions, such as fear, anger, or sadness, without the pressure of conforming to traditional artistic norms. Art therapy grounded in expressionism also encourages individuals to reconnect with their emotions, particularly those that may be repressed or denied. The exaggerated forms and chaotic color palettes typical of expressionism can bring to the surface intense feelings that may have been pushed aside in daily life. Clients can begin to understand their emotional states better by allowing these emotions to emerge through the creative process. This process often leads to a sense of catharsis, where feelings of emotional burden are released through the act of creating. Furthermore, expressionism in art therapy can be transformative, helping individuals to shift from a place of emotional fragmentation or distress to one of healing and integration. The raw, sometimes chaotic nature of the artworks can mirror the disorganized emotions the individual might be experiencing, but through artistic expression, a sense of coherence can begin to emerge. For example, through the use of intense color and form, an individual may begin to visually represent their feelings of anxiety or grief. The therapeutic process allows for this emotional material to be restructured, understood, and eventually integrated, leading to emotional growth. Ultimately, art therapy and expressionism provide a valuable combination for emotional healing. Expressionism's focus on intense, subjective emotion facilitates a process of self-exploration and release, while also offering a path towards self-acceptance and emotional clarity. This approach can be particularly beneficial for individuals dealing with trauma, grief, or psychological distress, providing a creative outlet through which they can reconnect with their emotions and begin the journey towards psychological healing. Expressionism and the subconscious mind. Expressionism, with its emphasis on the inner emotional world, is deeply connected to the exploration of the subconscious mind. While traditional art movements often sought to represent the external world with realism and objectivity, Expressionism breaks free from these conventions by focusing on the unspoken and the unseen aspects of human experience. This focus on the subjective and the internal invites a deep engagement with the subconscious, making Expressionism a powerful vehicle for exploring the hidden recesses of the human mind. The subconscious is the domain of repressed thoughts, desires, fears, and emotions that often go unnoticed or unacknowledged in daily life. Expressionist artists, influenced by the burgeoning field of psychoanalysis and the theories of Sigmund Freud, sought to give form to these unconscious drives. By distorting reality and using bold, intense color schemes, jagged lines, and abstract shapes, Expressionist art bypassed the intellect and engaged directly with the unconscious mind. The resulting works were not about creating a realistic or logical representation of the world, but rather about expressing the internal emotional and psychological chaos that is often hidden beneath the surface of conscious thought. One of the key ways in which Expressionism taps into the subconscious is through the distortion of form. By exaggerating the human figure or fragmenting the landscape, Expressionist artists were able to symbolize the internal conflicts and psychological fragmentation that many people experience but may not fully understand or articulate. Figures in works by artists like Egon Schiele or Ernst Ludwig Kirchner are often distorted or contorted, reflecting the inner psychological turmoil that can be difficult to process consciously. This manipulation of form is not merely for dramatic effect. It serves as a direct means of externalizing the subconscious, bringing buried feelings to the forefront of visual consciousness. Additionally, the use of color in expressionist art plays a significant role in connecting with the subconscious mind. Colors are not chosen for their aesthetic qualities alone, but are employed to evoke specific emotional responses that resonate on a deeper, subconscious level. For example, the use of fiery reds, anxious yellows, or melancholic blues can tap into primal emotions such as anger, fear, or sadness, triggering an immediate emotional reaction in the viewer. These colors have a psychological potency that bypasses logical thought and speaks directly to the unconscious mind. Expressionism's engagement with the subconscious is not just a technique used by the artist, it also invites the viewer to explore their own subconscious mind. The intense, often unsettling nature of expressionist works forces the viewer to confront uncomfortable emotions, desires, and anxieties that might otherwise remain hidden. The raw, unfiltered emotionality of these works opens a space for self-reflection, offering an opportunity to explore the subconscious layers of one's own psyche. In this way, expressionism serves as both a mirror and a window into the subconscious mind, reflecting the artist's internal struggles while also encouraging viewers to engage with their own deeper emotional and psychological truths. It is through this connection with the subconscious that expressionist art becomes a powerful tool for understanding the complexities of the human mind, revealing the unseen forces that shape our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Expressionist art as a reflection of mental health. Expressionist art, with its raw, emotive style and focus on the inner emotional landscape, has long been regarded as a powerful reflection of mental health. Rather than adhering to the traditional artistic goal of portraying external reality, Expressionism offers an intimate glimpse into the psychological states of the artist. This emphasis on the internal world makes Expressionist art uniquely suited to exploring the complexities of mental health, particularly the emotional and psychological struggles that are often hidden beneath the surface. At the heart of Expressionism is the idea that art can serve as an emotional outlet, allowing artists to externalize and make sense of their internal turmoil. Many Expressionist works vividly depict feelings of anxiety, depression, alienation, and existential despair, emotions that are often experienced on a deep subconscious level but can be difficult to articulate. By distorting reality, exaggerating forms, and using intense color palettes, Expressionist artists visually manifest the internal experiences that can feel overwhelming or isolating. For example, Edvard Munch's The Scream powerfully conveys the sense of existential dread and mental anguish, capturing the artist's internal distress in a way that is universally recognizable. The figure's wide eyes and open mouth express an emotional crisis, while the swirling colors in the background evoke a sense of chaos and confusion, echoing the psychological disarray felt during moments of intense anxiety or panic. Mental health struggles are often isolating, and Expressionism reflects this sense of alienation through the depiction of distorted, fragmented figures that seem disconnected from their surroundings or from one another. In works by artists like Egon Schiele and Ernst Ludwig Kirchner, figures are frequently depicted in exaggerated, contorted poses, their faces contorted with pain, anxiety, or longing. These figures, separated from the reality around them, represent the emotional and psychological disconnection that can accompany mental health challenges. The alienation portrayed in these works mirrors the loneliness that many individuals with mental health issues experience, making the artwork a powerful conduit for empathy and understanding. Beyond the individual experience, Expressionist art can also serve as a broader commentary on the collective psychological impact of societal changes. The early 20th century, when Expressionism emerged, was a time of upheaval, with war, industrialization, and rapid modernization all contributing to widespread feelings of disillusionment and mental strain. Expressionist works often reflect the collective trauma of these historical moments, offering insight into how mass societal events can influence individual mental health. In this sense, Expressionism can be seen as both a personal and social commentary on the emotional and psychological toll of modern life. Ultimately, expressionist art provides a powerful avenue for exploring mental health by giving visual form to the complex and often difficult to communicate emotional experiences that accompany psychological struggles. The movement's focus on the emotional and psychological depths of human existence invites viewers to reflect on their own mental states, fostering a deeper understanding of the human condition. By connecting the personal to the universal, expressionist art serves not only as a mirror for the artist's inner world, but also as a means for viewers to confront and reflect on their own mental health. The impact on the viewer's psyche. Expressionist art does not simply serve as a representation of the artist's inner world. It actively engages the viewer's psyche, stirring deep, often unconscious emotional responses. The movement's focus on raw, exaggerated emotions and distorted forms creates an immersive experience that can deeply impact how viewers perceive and interact with their own feelings. Rather than providing comfort or escapism, expressionism confronts the viewer with intense, often unsettling imagery that forces them to acknowledge the complexity and volatility of the human condition. This engagement with the viewer's emotional and psychological landscape is what gives expressionist art its profound and sometimes overwhelming impact. One of the key ways in which expressionist art affects the viewer's psyche is by triggering an emotional reaction through its use of color, form, and composition. The exaggerated use of bold, sometimes clashing colors, coupled with distorted and fragmented figures, evokes a visceral emotional response that can range from anxiety to exhilaration. For example, the intense reds, yellows, and oranges in Edvard Munch's The Scream amplify the sense of dread and panic, making the viewer feel as though they are caught in the emotional turmoil of the painting's central figure. The chaotic lines and distorted shapes evoke a sense of instability, which can mirror the viewer's own psychological unease or disquiet. In this way, the artwork becomes a mirror to the viewer's own subconscious, reflecting emotions they may not have fully acknowledged. In addition to this emotional reaction, expressionist art can also lead to self-reflection and introspection. The intense focus on inner emotional experiences, whether it's alienation, anxiety, or despair, invites the viewer to examine their own emotional state. Confronted with distorted or exaggerated representations of human figures and emotions, viewers may begin to recognize their own feelings of isolation or unease. In many cases, this can lead to a cathartic experience where the viewer confronts long repressed emotions or unresolved psychological conflicts. By allowing themselves to engage with these powerful emotional representations, viewers can gain insight into their own psyche and begin to process feelings they may have kept hidden. Expressionism also encourages empathy, as the viewer is drawn into the emotional world of the artwork. The exaggerated emotional expression of the figures often transcends the individual artist's experience, creating a shared emotional space between the artist and the viewer. As the viewer witnesses the emotional struggles depicted in the artwork, they may find themselves relating to the figures on a personal level, fostering a sense of connection and understanding. This shared emotional experience can offer a sense of comfort, as it reveals that the viewer is not alone in their struggles or feelings of vulnerability. Ultimately, expressionist art has a powerful and lasting impact on the viewer's psyche. Through its emotional intensity and focus on the inner workings of the human mind, it encourages self-reflection, emotional awareness, and empathy. While the experience may be unsettling or challenging, it also offers the opportunity for growth and understanding, allowing viewers to explore the deeper, often hidden aspects of their own emotions and psyche. Expressionism, in its raw portrayal of the human experience, holds up a mirror to both the artist and the viewer, compelling them to confront the complexity and depth of human emotion. Chapter 4: Expressionism in Visual Art. Expressionism in visual art is a powerful movement that sought to convey emotional and psychological experiences rather than simply portraying the external world. Emerging in the early 20th century, it represented a radical departure from previous artistic styles, such as realism and impressionism, which focused more on the accurate representation of nature or everyday life. Instead, expressionist artists were primarily concerned with the internal experience of the human subject, emotions, desires, fears, and struggles, often pushing the boundaries of traditional representation to capture the raw essence of human existence. At the core of expressionism in visual art is the use of distortion, exaggeration, and abstraction. Figures are frequently altered and distorted to emphasize emotional or psychological states rather than to represent the subject in a literal or idealized way. Artists such as Edvard Munch, Egon Schiele, and Ernst Ludwig Kirchner used these techniques to create works that were intense, dramatic, and often unsettling. In The Scream, Munch distorts the figure of the person in anguish, stretching the face and distorting the background to convey a sense of existential dread. This deliberate manipulation of form allows the viewer to experience the emotional intensity of the subject in a visceral, immediate way, connecting the viewer to the artist's inner world. Color is another essential element of expressionism in visual art. Rather than adhering to realistic color schemes, expressionist artists often used bold, exaggerated colors to evoke strong emotional responses. For example, vivid reds, yellows, and greens might symbolize anxiety, aggression, or alienation, while cool blues and purples could evoke sadness or introspection. The emotional power of color in expressionist works amplifies the psychological impact of the piece, drawing the viewer into the emotional state of the subject and heightening the sense of drama or unease. Composition and brushwork also play a crucial role in expressionism, contributing to the emotional impact of the work. Brushstrokes are often visible, creating a sense of movement or urgency, while compositions may be intentionally chaotic or fragmented to reflect internal emotional turmoil. The deliberate dissonance between form and content is key to capturing the complexity of human emotion, making expressionist art both confronting and cathartic for the viewer. Overall, expressionism in visual art represents an exploration of the emotional and psychological depth of the human experience. Through distortion, color, and dynamic composition, expressionist artists provided an outlet for intense emotional expression, allowing their work to transcend conventional representation and connect with the viewer on a deeply personal level. This approach not only changed the way art was perceived, but also reshaped how emotions and the human condition were understood within the realm of visual culture. Expressionism remains one of the most powerful and evocative movements in the history of art, continuing to resonate with audiences through its emotional intensity and its exploration of the internal world. Early Expressionism in painting. The early period of Expressionism in painting, roughly spanning from the late 19th century to the early 20th century, marked a dramatic departure from traditional artistic norms. Rooted in a response to the social, political, and psychological upheavals of the time, early Expressionist painters sought to convey emotions, subjective experiences, and the darker aspects of the human condition rather than realistic depictions of the external world. Emerging from the backdrop of rapid industrialization, urbanization, and the growing anxiety of modern life, early Expressionism in painting reflected the deep sense of alienation and disillusionment that many artists felt in the face of a changing world. One of the most significant movements within early Expressionism was Die Brücke, the bridge, formed in Dresden in 1905. Led by artists such as Ernst Ludwig Kirchner, Fritz Bleel, and Erich Heckel, Die Brücke sought to break away from academic traditions and embrace a new, raw, and spontaneous approach to painting. They were particularly inspired by the colors, forms, and emotional intensity of earlier works by Van Gogh and Gauguin. The group's work often featured vivid colors, bold brushstrokes, and distorted forms, capturing the inner emotional states of their subjects. Their paintings conveyed a sense of urgency and anxiety, reflecting the growing sense of alienation and existential crisis in modern society. Around the same time, another key group, Der Blaue Reiter, the Blue Rider, emerged in Munich, founded by Wassily Kandinsky and Franz Marc. Unlike De Bruyke's focus on raw, emotional immediacy, Der Blaue Reiter was more concerned with the spiritual dimensions of art and the use of abstraction. While still rooted in expressionistic ideas, the group sought to move beyond the depiction of external reality to explore the symbolic and metaphysical dimensions of the inner self. Kandinsky, in particular, pushed the boundaries of color and form, creating works that were more abstract, yet still profoundly emotional. His work aimed to express the emotional resonance of color and form without representing recognizable subjects, making him one of the pioneers of abstract expressionism. Early expressionist painters often used distorted, exaggerated figures to express the turbulence and emotional intensity of the time. In Edvard Munch's The Scream, a figure contorts in a moment of existential despair, surrounded by an environment that seems to mirror the character's inner turmoil. The use of color in Munch's work, along with the distorted forms, deepened the psychological impact, making the viewer feel the raw anxiety of the subject. Similarly, the work of Egon Schiele, known for his distorted portraits and figures, explored themes of sexuality, death, and psychological anguish. His unsettling, almost grotesque depictions of the human body conveyed a sense of internal conflict and emotional isolation. The early Expressionist period in painting marked a significant shift in the way artists approached their work. Rather than focusing on external reality, these artists aimed to delve deeper into the emotional and psychological experience, using distortion, bold colors, and exaggerated forms to reflect the turmoil of the modern world. This departure from traditional norms not only laid the groundwork for the later development of modern art, but also provided a means for artists to engage directly with the psychological and emotional realities of their time. Iconic works and artists, e.g., Edvard Munch, Ernst Ludwig Kirchner. The Expressionist movement produced some of the most iconic and emotionally powerful works in the history of art, and its influence can still be seen in contemporary visual culture. Among the key figures in early Expressionism, Edvard Munch and Ernst Ludwig Kirchner stand out for their profound contributions to the development of the style, each creating works that resonate deeply with the psychological and emotional themes central to Expressionism. Edvard Munch is perhaps best known for his iconic painting The Scream, 1893, a work that has become a symbol of existential anxiety and human vulnerability. In The Scream, Munch portrays a figure whose contorted expression conveys an overwhelming sense of terror and dread, set against a swirling, distorted background that amplifies the emotional intensity of the scene. The figure's wide open mouth and hands pressed to the face convey a silent scream that echoes the artist's exploration of inner psychological turmoil. Munch's use of color, bold reds, oranges, and yellows, adds to the emotional depth of the work, creating a sense of urgency and distress. His work was often deeply personal, reflecting his own struggles with anxiety, depression, and grief, which he explored through distorted figures and turbulent landscapes that blurred the line between the external world and the inner emotional state. The Scream remains one of the most recognized and powerful representations of human anxiety in art history. Ernst Ludwig Kirchner, a leading member of the German expressionist group Die Brücke, was another central figure in the movement. His work, particularly his portraits and urban scenes, vividly captures the alienation and psychological fragmentation experienced in modern society. Kirchner's Street, Berlin, 1913, is a striking example of his style, showcasing distorted figures walking through a chaotic, disorienting cityscape. The bold use of color, thick brushstrokes, and angular, fragmented forms convey the psychological dissonance and isolation that the artist felt in the modern urban environment. His figures, often portrayed as disjointed and emotionally tense, reflect a sense of alienation from society, which was a dominant theme in Expressionist art. Kirchner's work is charged with energy and emotion, revealing the anxiety and inner conflict that defined much of the Expressionist movement. Both Munch and Kirchner utilized distortion and color to explore the darker aspects of the human experience, whether it be existential dread, loneliness, or inner conflict. Their works often unsettle the viewer, drawing them into a deeper engagement with the emotional and psychological states depicted in the paintings. Through their art, they challenged conventional notions of representation, pushing the boundaries of what art could convey about the inner workings of the mind and the complexities of human emotion. These iconic artists remain central figures in the Expressionist movement, having left a lasting impact on the development of modern art and the way we understand the connection between emotion, psychology, and visual expression. The evolution of Expressionism in art movements. Expressionism, which emerged in the early 20th century, did not remain a static movement. Instead, it evolved and influenced numerous art forms and movements, with its emotional intensity and psychological depth leaving a lasting impact on visual culture. From its roots in post-impressionism and symbolism to its profound influence on later artistic developments, Expressionism's evolution reflects both the changing dynamics of society and the deepening exploration of the human psyche. In its earliest phase, Expressionism was largely defined by its break from realism. Artists sought to depict not the external world, but the internal emotional experiences of individuals. Groups like Die Brücke and Der Blaue Reiter were at the forefront of this shift, with artists like Edvard Munch, Ernst Ludwig Kirchner, and Wassily Kandinsky pushing the boundaries of color, form, and representation. These artists were interested in capturing subjective experiences and psychological states, often distorting the human figure and using intense, non-naturalistic colors to convey emotion. This approach marked a clear departure from the more restrained, realistic depictions of life seen in earlier movements. The 1920s and 1930s saw Expressionism's influence grow, particularly through its integration into new movements and artistic practices. As the world grappled with the aftermath of World War I, the trauma and disillusionment that followed gave rise to movements like Dadaism and Surrealism, both of which borrowed heavily from the expressive, abstract, and distorted qualities of Expressionism. Dadaists, such as Hans Arp and Tristan Tzara, embraced absurdity and chaos using non-traditional mediums and techniques to challenge societal norms and conventions. In a similar vein, Surrealist artists like Salvador Dali and Max Ernst employed expressionist techniques to explore the subconscious mind, dreams, and irrationality, linking the inner emotional landscape with the bizarre and fantastical. The influence of Expressionism continued into the post-World War II era, particularly within the abstract expressionist movement. Artists like Jackson Pollock and Mark Rothko, although not directly associated with early Expressionism, drew on its focus on emotional depth and the subjective experience. Abstract Expressionism, emerging in the 1940s and 1950s in the United States, extended Expressionism's emotional power through abstraction, using large-scale canvases, vibrant colors, and energetic brushwork to evoke intense emotional states. Pollock's gestural paintings, for instance, took the physicality of painting to a new extreme, expressing the artist's psychological states in chaotic, visceral forms. In the contemporary art world, the legacy of Expressionism can still be seen in a variety of forms, from street art to installation and digital art. Artists continue to explore the emotional and psychological dimensions of the human experience, often employing innovative techniques and media to communicate the depth of human feeling and internal struggle. Ultimately, the evolution of Expressionism in art movements illustrates its enduring relevance and adaptability. From its origins in the early 20th century to its far-reaching influence in subsequent movements, Expressionism has remained a vital force in art, constantly evolving to address the complexities of modern life and the emotional intricacies of the human condition. The role of abstract expressionism. Abstract Expressionism, which emerged in the United States in the 1940s and 1950s, played a pivotal role in the evolution of Expressionism, marking a significant shift from traditional figural representation to non-representational art. While rooted in the emotional intensity and psychological depth of early Expressionism, Abstract Expressionism took these ideas further by emphasizing abstraction, spontaneous creation, and the physicality of the painting process. This movement was both a continuation of the Expressionist focus on subjective experience and an innovation that redefined what art could express about the human condition. The central aim of Abstract Expressionism was to convey the artist's emotional and psychological state through the medium of paint, without the constraints of representation. In doing so, artists sought to tap into universal emotions, anger, joy, despair, ecstasy, using purely visual elements such as color, form, texture, and line. Unlike earlier expressionists who employed distortion and exaggeration of the human figure, abstract expressionists rejected recognizable forms altogether. Artists like Jackson Pollock, Mark Rothko, and Willem de Kooning created works that were large in scale and filled with raw, energetic gestures. The emphasis on process, particularly Pollock's drip paintings, became a critical aspect of the movement. The act of painting itself was seen as an expression of the artist's internal turmoil, with the chaotic, often unpredictable marks left on the canvas serving as a direct reflection of the artist's psychological state. Pollock's drip technique, for example, in which he poured or dripped paint onto a canvas laid on the floor, emphasized the act of creation as a form of catharsis. These works, such as Number 5, 1948, invite the viewer to experience the emotional charge of the painting as an abstract composition of color and texture. The chaotic, all-over compositions convey a sense of intense emotion, where the subjectivity of the artist becomes inseparable from the physicality of the painting. Mark Rothko, on the other hand, approached abstraction with a different method. His large, color-filled paintings, such as Number 61, Rust and Blue, are marked by glowing, soft-edged blocks of color that evoke an emotional response through subtle shifts in tone and color contrast. Rothko's work was not about the process of painting itself, but about creating an environment for the viewer to immerse themselves in the emotions the colors evoked, often invoking feelings of transcendence, melancholy, or spirituality. Abstract Expressionism's role in the larger context of art history is significant. It marked the moment when New York became the epicenter of the art world, displacing Paris and establishing the United States as the dominant force in the global art scene. Moreover, Abstract Expressionism's emphasis on individual expression and emotional authenticity paved the way for subsequent artistic movements, influencing everything from pop art to minimalism and conceptual art. Though abstract, the emotional resonance of the works continued the expressionist tradition of communicating the complexities of the human experience through art. By removing the figurative, abstract expressionism allowed for a new freedom in expressing the raw, unmediated emotions of the artist, making it one of the most profound and influential movements in the history of modern art. Chapter 5, Expressionism in Literature. Expressionism, a movement that fundamentally altered the landscape of art, also found a profound and influential expression in literature. Emerging in the early 20th century alongside its visual art counterpart, Expressionism in literature was driven by a desire to portray the inner workings of the human psyche, to give voice to the turbulence and alienation of modern life. Much like in the visual arts, Expressionist literature rejected realism, focusing instead on intense emotional states, subjective experience, and the distortion of reality to reflect the psychological struggles of individuals. In literary expressionism, the narrative often took a fragmented, disjointed form, emphasizing the chaotic and irrational aspects of human consciousness. Writers deliberately distorted language, structure, and plot to communicate the fragmented nature of existence and the sense of disillusionment that gripped the modern world. The internal experiences of characters, whether fear, anxiety, or despair, were placed at the forefront of these works, often overshadowing external events or social commentary. This made expressionist literature particularly intense and emotionally charged, as it sought not to describe the world, but to convey the overwhelming and confusing inner turmoil that individuals faced. German writers were particularly influential in the development of expressionist literature, with playwrights like Georg Kaiser and Frank Wedekind, as well as poets such as Gottfried Benn, offering some of the most striking examples of the movement's literary form. Kaiser's plays, such as From Morn to Midnight, 1912, depict a world in which characters experience radical emotional breakdowns and are caught in a disorienting web of alienation and fear. These plays often portray the collapse of traditional societal structures and the fragmentation of the individual's identity, capturing the disillusionment of the time. Similarly, Wedekind's Lulu, written in the early 20th century, explores the darker aspects of human sexuality, desire, and societal repression, presenting its characters in distorted, exaggerated forms that mirror their inner struggles. In poetry, Gottfried Benn's work exemplifies the expressionist approach to language. In poems such as The Murderer, 1912, Benn uses stark, dissonant imagery and language to depict human alienation and the emotional numbness brought on by modern life. His fragmented, jarring use of syntax and metaphor forces the reader to confront the disjointed emotional states of the characters within the poems. Expressionism in literature also found a place in the works of Franz Kafka, who, though often not formally classified as an expressionist, shared many of the movement's thematic preoccupations. Kafka's The Metamorphosis, 1915, deals with themes of isolation, identity, and existential crisis, encapsulating the feeling of being trapped within one's own body and mind. His distorted depictions of human existence, where characters are often confronted with the absurdity of their situations, embody the essence of expressionist thought. Ultimately, expressionism in literature was a reaction to the emotional, psychological, and existential crises brought on by the modern world. By focusing on internal experience and distorting reality, literary expressionism sought to capture the complexity and depth of human emotion in a rapidly changing society. This genre opened new avenues for literary exploration, focusing on the subconscious, alienation, and the emotional extremes of human existence, paving the way for modernist and postmodernist writing. Expressionist literature origins and key authors. Expressionist literature, which developed alongside the visual arts in the early 20th century, emerged as a reaction to the turbulence of modern society, including industrialization, urbanization, and the psychological crises that accompanied these changes. The movement sought to capture the raw emotions, internal struggles, and existential dilemmas of individuals, often portraying a distorted, fragmented reality to mirror the disintegration of traditional social structures and the alienation felt by many in the modern world. Expressionist writers were deeply concerned with the inner workings of the mind and the emotional experiences of their characters, often exploring themes of fear, anxiety, isolation, and despair. The origins of expressionist literature can be traced back to the late 19th century, particularly through the influence of German symbolism and the works of Friedrich Nietzsche, whose philosophy of existentialism and the will to power resonated with many expressionist writers. The symbolists, with their emphasis on individual perception, subjective reality, and the mystical aspects of human experience, laid the groundwork for the more radical exploration of emotion that would characterize expressionist literature. By the early 20th century, with the backdrop of World War I and the growing sense of societal fragmentation, writers sought to break away from the conventions of realism and naturalism, instead embracing a more abstract, intense style that prioritized inner experience over external reality. Key authors of Expressionist literature include German playwrights and poets such as Georg Kaiser, Frank Wedekind, and Gottfried Benn. Kaiser's works, like From Morn to Midnight, 1912, are emblematic of Expressionist drama. His plays often focus on characters experiencing intense emotional upheavals and psychological breakdowns, reflecting the chaos and alienation of modern life. Frank Wedekind's Lulu, written in the early 20th century, also reflects Expressionist themes, especially with its focus on sexuality, desire, and the breakdown of societal norms. His portrayal of exaggerated, distorted characters and their internal struggles fits well within the movement's focus on the irrational and emotional extremes of human experience. Gottfried Benn, a prominent poet of the Expressionist movement, was known for his stark, unsettling imagery and exploration of human alienation. In his poems, such as The Murderer, 1912, Benn used fragmented, dissonant language to convey a sense of psychological alienation and moral disintegration. His poetry, often dark and introspective, reflects the despair and dehumanization brought on by modern life. One of the most significant figures in Expressionist literature, though not formally categorized as an Expressionist, is Franz Kafka. His works, particularly The Metamorphosis, 1915, express themes of isolation, absurdity, and the dissolution of identity, encapsulating the movement's concern with the existential crisis of the individual in a modern, mechanized world. The distorted realities of Kafka's characters mirror the Expressionist emphasis on psychological fragmentation and the inability to reconcile one's internal self with the external world. In essence, Expressionist literature was a response to the emotional, psychological, and societal upheaval of the early 20th century. Through their use of distorted narratives, intense emotional states, and fragmented structures, Expressionist writers sought to communicate the chaos and alienation of modern existence, leaving a lasting impact on literature and paving the way for future experimental and modernist literary movements. Themes of alienation, anxiety, and isolation. One of the most profound themes in Expressionist literature is the exploration of alienation, anxiety, and isolation. These themes reflect the emotional and psychological dislocation felt by individuals in a rapidly changing, increasingly industrialized world. As societies became more urbanized and mechanized in the early 20th century, traditional ways of life broke down, leaving individuals feeling disconnected, estranged from others, and even from themselves. Expressionist writers sought to capture this profound sense of separation and internal turmoil, using their works to give voice to the human condition in an era marked by confusion, despair, and a lack of meaning. Alienation in Expressionist literature is often depicted through characters who struggle to connect with the world around them. These individuals may feel isolated from society, family, or even their own sense of self. The alienation is not just social or physical, but deeply psychological, with characters often experiencing a disconnection from their own emotions, desires, and identity. This existential separation reflects the broader disillusionment with modernity and the loss of individual agency in an increasingly impersonal, mechanized world. Works like Frank Wedekind's Lulu, written in the early 20th century, and Georg Kaiser's From Morn to Midnight, 1912, show characters trapped in environments where their attempts to find meaning or intimacy are thwarted, highlighting the emotional and psychological fragmentation of modern life. Anxiety, another dominant theme in Expressionist literature, is often portrayed as an overwhelming, inescapable force that the characters cannot fully understand or control. This sense of anxiety is closely tied to the rapid societal changes of the time, world wars, urbanization, and industrialization, that left individuals questioning their place in the world. Characters in Expressionist works frequently experience deep internal turmoil, struggling with fears that range from existential dread to the fear of societal rejection. The literature of this period was concerned with the human psyche's fragility, often revealing the intense emotional reactions provoked by a world that seemed out of control. This anxiety is sometimes reflected in the disjointed, fragmented narrative structures or in the use of jarring, discordant language, as seen in the poetry of Gottfried Benn, where the chaos of modern existence is expressed through violent and uncomfortable imagery. Isolation in expressionist literature is not simply physical, but often psychological, with characters who feel unable to bridge the emotional gap between themselves and the world around them. In Franz Kafka's The Metamorphosis, 1915, for instance, the protagonist, Gregor Samsa, is literally transformed into an insect, a grotesque distortion that symbolizes his complete alienation from his family and society. The isolation he experiences is both physical and emotional, as he is increasingly marginalized and dehumanized, reflecting the modern individual's struggle to find connection in a cold, indifferent world. Overall, the themes of alienation, anxiety, and isolation are central to expressionist literature, offering a window into the human psyche at a time of deep societal upheaval. These works convey the emotional distress and psychological fragmentation felt by individuals grappling with a world that no longer provides clear meaning or security. Through these themes, expressionist writers conveyed the existential challenges of modern life, resonating deeply with audiences who shared similar feelings of isolation and uncertainty. The psychological depth of expressionist prose and poetry. Expressionist prose and poetry are deeply invested in exploring the complexities of the human mind, focusing on the psychological depth of characters and their inner turmoil. These literary forms go beyond mere surface-level emotional expression, diving into the fragmented and often chaotic nature of human consciousness. By using distorted narrative structures, disjointed language, and exaggerated emotions, expressionist writers sought to reveal the hidden dimensions of human experience, often in response to the alienation and anxiety that pervaded the modern world. In expressionist prose, characters often exist in a state of psychological crisis, with their thoughts and actions driven by inner forces rather than external circumstances. These characters may experience a heightened sense of paranoia, fear, or confusion as their perception of reality becomes increasingly distorted. This sense of fragmentation is reflected in the structure of expressionist prose itself, where traditional narrative forms are broken down or replaced by disjointed, nonlinear storytelling. In works like Franz Kafka's The Metamorphosis, 1915, the protagonist, Gregor Samsa, undergoes a physical transformation that mirrors his deep psychological alienation and disintegration. The absurdity of his situation and his growing isolation from family and society are symbolic of the inner chaos and confusion he experiences. Kafka's disorienting narrative and the portrayal of a mind in crisis create a psychological depth that is central to the expressionist approach. In poetry, the psychological depth of expressionism is even more pronounced, as poets often use language as a tool to express not only the emotions of the individual, but the very workings of the psyche. Gottfried Benn's poetry is a prime example of how expressionist poets explored the psychological landscape through dissonant imagery and fragmented language. His works, such as The Murderer, 1912, delve into the dark, alienated corners of the mind, using stark, unsettling imagery to communicate the sense of existential dread and emotional numbness that characterize the modern condition. The fractured syntax and intense, almost violent metaphors in Benn's poetry create a sense of psychological dislocation where the boundaries between the conscious and unconscious blur, reflecting the internal conflict that was central to the expressionist worldview. The psychological depth in expressionist literature also touches on the unconscious mind, a realm that was gaining increased interest during the early 20th century due to the influence of psychoanalysis. The works of expressionist writers and poets often explore the tension between the conscious self and repressed desires or fears. The subconscious is revealed through symbolism, distorted imagery, and the breakdown of logical structures, giving the reader a glimpse into the irrational and often disturbing aspects of the human psyche. Overall, The psychological depth of expressionist prose and poetry allows for a profound exploration of the human experience, where emotions and thoughts are not simply described, but are given voice through a raw, unfiltered lens. By focusing on the inner turmoil of characters and the fragmentation of their minds, expressionist writers provide a window into the emotional complexity and instability that mark the modern era. This exploration of the psyche, through both narrative and poetic innovation, remains one of the movement's most powerful contributions to literature. The influence of Expressionism on modern literature. The influence of Expressionism on modern literature is profound and far-reaching, leaving a lasting impact on the way writers explore the complexities of the human psyche, the fragmentation of identity, and the alienation of individuals within society. Emerging in the early 20th century as a response to industrialization, war, and societal upheaval, Expressionism pushed the boundaries of literary form and content, making it a critical precursor to many of the literary movements that followed. Its emphasis on subjective experience, emotional intensity, and psychological depth significantly shaped modernist and postmodernist literature, influencing a wide range of writers and literary genres. Expressionism in literature introduced a new way of portraying the inner workings of the mind, emphasizing the irrational and the subconscious. This focus on the emotional and psychological turmoil of characters was groundbreaking, especially at a time when traditional realism sought to depict the external world in a more objective manner. Expressionist writers shattered conventional narrative structures to reflect the fragmented and disorienting nature of modern life, often using distorted language, disjointed plots, and a fragmented sense of time. This innovation paved the way for modernist writers like James Joyce, Virginia Woolf, and William Faulkner, who sought to represent the complexities of consciousness and the inner lives of characters. For instance, Woolf's use of stream of consciousness technique in works like Mrs. Dalloway and To the Lighthouse reflects a clear influence of expressionist explorations of fragmented experience and the instability of identity. Furthermore, expressionist themes of alienation, existential crisis, and the breakdown of traditional social structures can be seen in the works of later writers, especially those involved in the existentialist movement. Writers such as Albert Camus, Jean-Paul Sartre, and Franz Kafka, though not strictly part of the expressionist movement, shared many of its concerns about the human condition in an increasingly alienating world. Kafka's The Trial and Camus' The Stranger echo the expressionist concern with the absurdity of existence and the individual's search for meaning in a seemingly indifferent world. Expressionism also had a significant influence on poetry, with the movement's emphasis on the emotional power of language and the breakdown of conventional forms, inspiring poets like T.S. Eliot and Ezra Pound. Their works, such as Eliot's The Waste Land, reflect the fragmented, disjointed quality of modern life and the psychological disintegration of individuals within it. The innovative use of fragmented imagery and symbolism in their poetry mirrors the expressionist effort to depict inner emotional states and the alienation of the individual in a rapidly changing world. In addition, expressionist influences can be seen in the experimental nature of postmodern literature, where narrative structures, language, and character development are often fragmented or nonlinear. The exploration of individual subjectivity, the fluidity of identity, and the disintegration of coherent meaning in postmodern works owes much to the groundwork laid by the Expressionists. In sum, Expressionism's legacy in modern literature is profound, shaping the ways in which writers explore the emotional, psychological, and existential dimensions of the human experience. By breaking with traditional narrative forms and focusing on subjective experience, Expressionism opened the door for future generations of writers to experiment with language, structure, and the depiction of the inner self. This influence remains a key element of both modernist and postmodernist literary traditions. Chapter 6: Expressionism in Theater and Film. Expressionism, which emerged in the early 20th century as a reaction to the emotional and psychological disillusionment of modern life, found a particularly potent outlet in theater and film. These two forms of art were uniquely suited to convey the raw, distorted emotions and inner turmoil that defined the movement. In both theater and film, Expressionism sought to abandon traditional, naturalistic representations of reality in favor of stylized, exaggerated depictions that emphasized the emotional and psychological states of the characters. The stage and the screen became powerful vehicles for exploring the complexities of the human mind, the alienation of individuals in society, and the disintegration of traditional norms. In theater, Expressionism took shape through plays that emphasized symbolic settings, distorted characters, and nonlinear narratives. The movement broke away from the conventions of realism, where everyday life was depicted in a detailed and lifelike manner, and instead focused on presenting the inner emotional experiences of the characters. The stage design often reflected this psychological landscape, with sets that were exaggerated, angular, and surreal. Lighting and costumes were similarly unconventional, often used to emphasize the emotional tension or alienation of characters, rather than to create a realistic depiction of the environment. One of the most famous examples of expressionist theater is the German playwright Georg Kaiser's From Morn to Midnight, 1912, in which the protagonist's emotional journey is portrayed through a series of fragmented, surreal scenes that convey a sense of inner chaos and disillusionment. Similarly, the works of playwright Frank Wedekind, especially Lulu, utilize symbolic, distorted characters to explore themes of sexuality, desire, and societal repression in a highly stylized, expressionist manner. Expressionism in film, often referred to as German expressionist cinema, became especially influential in the 1920s. Filmmakers used visual techniques such as distorted sets, dramatic lighting, and exaggerated camera angles to convey the psychological states of their characters. The resulting films were often dreamlike, surreal, and filled with symbolic imagery, reflecting the inner emotional turmoil of the characters. One of the key films of this movement is The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, 1920, directed by Robert Wiene. The film is a prime example of the use of distorted sets, shadows, and angular design to reflect the twisted psychological reality of the characters. The plot, centered around madness and control, underscores the expressionist focus on the darker aspects of the human psyche. Another seminal work is Nosferatu, 1922, directed by F.W. Murnau, which, through its use of chiaroscuro lighting and eerie imagery, explores fear, dread, and the supernatural. In both theater and film, Expressionism also had a significant influence on the development of genres such as horror and psychological thrillers. The exaggerated emotions, distorted realities, and exploration of the darker aspects of the human mind that defined Expressionism provided a rich foundation for these genres. Filmmakers and playwrights alike employed these techniques to portray human anxieties, fears, and the struggle for meaning in a chaotic, unstable world. Overall, Expressionism in theater and film played a crucial role in reshaping the way emotions and psychological experiences were portrayed on stage and screen. By emphasizing subjective experience, distortion, and symbolism, it allowed audiences to explore the deeper emotional and existential struggles of characters in ways that were both innovative and profoundly impactful. Expressionism in drama, breaking traditional boundaries. Expressionism in drama represents a radical departure from the traditional conventions of theatrical representation, embracing a style that emphasizes the emotional, psychological, and subjective experiences of characters. Emerging in the early 20th century, the movement sought to break free from the constraints of realism and naturalism, which focused on depicting life as it appeared on the surface. Expressionist drama instead delved into the inner lives of its characters, often portraying distorted, exaggerated, and surreal realities to reflect their emotional states and psychological turmoil. This departure from convention marked a dramatic shift in how theater approached the human experience, influencing not only the aesthetics of performance, but also the themes and narratives explored on stage. One of the key features of expressionist drama is its focus on the internal rather than the external. In contrast to traditional plays that centered on objective plot development and realistic interactions, expressionist plays often depict characters in a state of crisis or emotional disarray. The plot is frequently fragmented or nonlinear, mirroring the disjointed, chaotic experiences of the characters. This approach allows the audience to experience the emotional and psychological fragmentation of the characters in a direct and visceral way, rather than simply observing it from a distance. The characters in expressionist drama often embody exaggerated emotions, fear, anxiety, alienation, despair, that take precedence over their rational behavior or external circumstances. The physicality of expressionist theater is equally important. Set designs, lighting, and costumes are often abstract, distorted, or symbolic, reflecting the inner world of the characters rather than attempting to create a realistic environment. In expressionist plays, the set is frequently an extension of the character's psyche, representing their emotional state or mental conflict. For instance, in German playwright Georg Kaiser's From Morn to Midnight, 1912, the set is designed to mirror the protagonist's mental breakdown, with surreal and exaggerated elements that evoke his inner turmoil. Lighting is similarly employed to create a heightened emotional atmosphere, often casting deep shadows or using sharp contrasts to emphasize the psychological intensity of the action. Themes of alienation, existential crisis, and the disintegration of identity are central to expressionist drama. Characters in these plays often struggle with a sense of isolation from society or from their own sense of self, reflecting the disorienting effects of modernity. The disconnection between the individual's internal world and the external reality is a recurring theme, with characters frequently depicted as trapped in a world that they cannot understand or control. This reflects the anxieties and fears that dominated early 20th century society, especially in the wake of World War I and the rapid changes brought about by industrialization and urbanization. Expressionist drama also introduced a more symbolic and allegorical mode of storytelling, with characters often representing larger societal forces or psychological concepts. In plays like Frank Wedekind's Lulu, the characters symbolize repressed desires, sexuality, and the breakdown of traditional moral codes. These plays often explore the tension between the individual and society, highlighting the individual's struggle for freedom in a world that feels increasingly oppressive and alienating. Ultimately, expressionism in drama broke traditional boundaries by rejecting the notion that theater should be a mere reflection of everyday life. Instead, it redefined the theater as a space where subjective experience, emotional intensity, and psychological complexity could be explored in all their raw, disorienting forms. Through its non-realistic techniques and themes of alienation and existential crisis, expressionism reshaped the landscape of theater, influencing future generations of playwrights and continuing to resonate in modern dramatic works. Key works and playwrights, e.g., Georg Kaiser, August Strindberg. Expressionism in drama gave rise to several pioneering playwrights whose works defined and advanced the movement. Among these, Georg Kaiser and August Strindberg are often considered central figures. Their plays explored the intense emotional states, existential crises, and the psychological fragmentation characteristic of expressionism. These playwrights embraced non-realistic forms of theater, using symbolism, fragmented narratives, and exaggerated characters to reflect the inner turmoil and alienation of modern individuals. Georg Kaiser, a key figure in German expressionist theater, is best known for his works that explore themes of social alienation, personal disillusionment, and the loss of individual identity. His play From Morn to Midnight, 1912, is a prime example of expressionist theater presenting a protagonist who experiences a psychological breakdown and a deep sense of alienation after committing a crime. The play's structure, which unfolds through a series of disjointed and fragmented scenes, mirrors the protagonist's inner turmoil and reflects the disorienting effects of modernity. Kaiser's use of symbolic sets and heightened emotional expression further emphasizes the disconnection between the inner world of the characters and the external world around them. His works often convey a critique of modern capitalist society, highlighting how industrialization and urbanization alienate individuals from meaningful human connections. August Strindberg, while often associated with naturalism and symbolism, also made significant contributions to the development of Expressionist theater. His play, The Dance of Death, 1900, is often considered a precursor to Expressionism, with its exploration of psychological conflict and the breakdown of social order. The play centers around a toxic, destructive relationship between a married couple, highlighting themes of jealousy, resentment, and despair. Strindberg's portrayal of human relationships as battlegrounds, where individuals are consumed by their internal fears and insecurities, resonates with the expressionist emphasis on emotional intensity and psychological depth. His later works, such as A Dream Play, 1901, incorporate more abstract, dreamlike elements, using surreal imagery and nonlinear structures to explore the complexity of the human psyche. Another important work in the development of Expressionist theater is Frank Wedekin's Lulu, 1904, which explores themes of sexuality, social repression, and the individual's struggle for autonomy. The character of Lulu, a woman who defies societal norms and expectations, embodies the tension between personal desire and societal constraint. Wedekin's work is highly symbolic, using characters and events as representations of broader social and psychological forces, a hallmark of Expressionist theater. The play's focus on taboo subjects and its portrayal of intense, often violent emotions were groundbreaking for its time, pushing the boundaries of what was acceptable in theater. These key works by Georg Kaiser, August Strindberg, and Frank Wedekind exemplify the central themes and stylistic innovations of Expressionism in drama. By breaking with traditional theatrical conventions and embracing a more symbolic, emotional, and psychological approach to storytelling, these playwrights created works that continue to influence modern theater. Their exploration of the human condition, particularly the alienation and existential struggles of individuals, remains a powerful legacy in the world of drama. Cinematic Expressionism, Visual and Narrative Styles. Cinematic Expressionism, particularly within the realm of German Expressionist cinema, was a revolutionary approach to filmmaking that emerged in the 1920s. This style focused on representing the emotional and psychological states of characters through distorted visuals and unconventional narrative techniques. The movement marked a significant departure from the realistic portrayals of life that dominated early cinema, instead emphasizing the subjective experience of the individual, often reflecting feelings of alienation, fear, and disillusionment. Cinematic Expressionism became a key influence on later genres such as horror, film noir, and psychological thrillers, leaving an indelible mark on the history of cinema. At the heart of Cinematic Expressionism was the idea that the visual aspects of the film should reflect the inner emotional world of the characters. Filmmakers used exaggerated, stylized sets that often looked surreal or distorted. Buildings and landscapes were presented with sharp angles, jagged lines, and twisted forms, creating an otherworldly atmosphere. These distorted sets were not just physical environments, but were meant to represent the psychological states of the characters inhabiting them. The environment became a projection of the mind, emphasizing feelings of confinement, madness, and alienation. The use of light and shadow was also a key technique in cinematic expressionism. Chiaroscuro lighting, with its dramatic contrasts between light and dark, was employed to evoke mood, heighten suspense, and emphasize the emotional tension of scenes. This visual style contributed to an intense, dreamlike atmosphere, making the viewer feel the inner turmoil and instability of the characters. In addition to visual style, the narrative structure of expressionist cinema often deviated from traditional storytelling. The plots were frequently fragmented, nonlinear, or symbolic, reflecting the fragmented and disjointed nature of the characters' psyches. Films did not follow a clear-cut progression, but instead focused on capturing emotional experiences, often without clear resolution. This style was especially evident in films like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, 1920, directed by Robert Wiene. The story, centered on madness and manipulation, is told through a series of distorted and surreal scenes that mimic the protagonist's disturbed mental state. The film's twisted, angular sets and eerie lighting create an atmosphere of disorientation, inviting the audience to experience the protagonist's fear and confusion firsthand. Another iconic example of cinematic expressionism is Nosferatu, 1922, directed by F.W. Murnau. The film's visual style, with its use of shadows and distorted imagery, amplifies the sense of dread and unease that permeates the narrative. The supernatural terror of the vampire Count Orlok is portrayed not just through his actions, but through the very design of the world around him, which mirrors the unsettling psychological atmosphere of the film. Murnau's use of movement, framing, and light all contribute to the overall sense of horror, making the environment as threatening as the characters themselves. Cinematic expressionism, with its innovative use of visual and narrative techniques, pushed the boundaries of film as an art form. Its emphasis on subjective experience, emotional intensity, and psychological depth reshaped the way stories were told on screen, influencing not only subsequent genres, but also the broader evolution of filmmaking. Impact on filmmakers and modern cinema, e.g., German Expressionist cinema. The influence of German Expressionist cinema extends far beyond its own time, leaving a lasting impact on filmmakers and the development of modern cinema. Emerging in the 1920s, German Expressionism revolutionized filmmaking with its striking visual style, innovative narrative structures, and psychological depth, making it one of the most important movements in the history of cinema. Its impact can be seen in a variety of genres, including horror, film noir, and psychological thrillers, where elements such as distorted sets, chiaroscuro lighting, and fragmented narratives have been employed to evoke emotional tension and explore the complexities of the human psyche. One of the key elements that German Expressionism brought to modern cinema was the idea of visual storytelling. Filmmakers like F.W. Murnau, Robert Wiene, and Fritz Lang used exaggerated, symbolic sets and dramatic lighting to convey the psychological states of their characters, turning the physical environment into a reflection of their emotional and mental turmoil. This focus on the visual experience was revolutionary for its time and set the stage for the cinematic techniques that would later become hallmarks of modern filmmaking. The use of shadows, stark contrasts of light and dark, and distorted perspectives all became tools to create mood, heighten suspense, and represent the inner worlds of characters in a way that was unparalleled in previous cinematic traditions. Films like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, 1920, and Nosferatu, 1922, are prime examples of this approach, with their use of set design and lighting creating a sense of unease and alienation that continues to resonate in contemporary horror and thriller films. Beyond the visual elements, the psychological depth explored in German Expressionist films had a profound influence on modern cinema. These films often dealt with themes of madness, alienation, and moral ambiguity, tapping into the anxieties of the post-World War I era. This emphasis on psychological conflict and the portrayal of characters' inner turmoil laid the groundwork for later developments in psychological thrillers, film noir, and even the psychological dramas of contemporary cinema. Filmmakers such as Alfred Hitchcock, whose films like Psycho 1960 drew heavily from expressionist techniques, used similar visual and narrative strategies to explore the dark recesses of the human mind. The use of subjective camera angles, fragmented storytelling, and intense emotional focus in Hitchcock's work can be traced back to the innovations of German Expressionist cinema. Moreover, German Expressionist cinema also had a lasting impact on the horror genre. The iconic imagery of Nosferatu, with its eerie shadows and the monstrous figure of Count Orlok, influenced the aesthetic of later horror films, from the classic Universal monster films to modern horror movies. The psychological terror and exploration of the human subconscious in expressionist films provided a blueprint for filmmakers like David Lynch, whose works like Eraserhead 1977 draw heavily on expressionist influences to evoke unease and explore the complexities of identity and consciousness. In conclusion, German expressionist cinema not only shaped the way filmmakers approached visual storytelling and character psychology, but also laid the foundation for many of the cinematic techniques that define modern cinema. Its influence can be seen in a wide range of genres, from horror to film noir to psychological thrillers, and its legacy continues to shape the way stories are told on screen today. Chapter 7: Expressionism's Role in Society and Culture. Expressionism, emerging in the early 20th century, played a significant role in reshaping the cultural landscape of its time, challenging traditional artistic conventions and reflecting the shifting social and political realities of the era. It was not just an artistic movement, but a response to the profound changes occurring in society, marked by industrialization, urbanization, and the psychological aftermath of World War I. Expressionism sought to express the emotional and psychological experience of modern life, often highlighting the alienation, anxiety, and disillusionment felt by individuals in an increasingly fragmented world. Its impact on society and culture can be understood in terms of its reflection of modern existential struggles, its challenge to conventional norms, and its influence on other artistic forms and intellectual movements. At its core, Expressionism was deeply concerned with the individual's internal world, representing emotions and psychological states rather than external reality. In a world that was rapidly changing, marked by the horrors of war, economic instability, and shifting societal structures, Expressionist artists sought to give voice to the individual's suffering and disorientation. The alienation and dislocation portrayed in Expressionist art mirrored the experiences of people who felt disconnected from both their surroundings and their own identities. This emotional intensity and psychological depth resonated with audiences, offering a means of understanding the complexities and struggles of modern life. The movement became a means for artists to channel their discontent with the social and political climate, particularly in Germany, where Expressionism was most prominent. It rejected the idealized depictions of society and sought to convey a more truthful, albeit disturbing, view of human existence. In terms of cultural impact, Expressionism influenced not only the visual arts, but also literature, theater, film, and music. The movement inspired a generation of playwrights, poets, filmmakers, and composers who sought to explore the darker sides of the human experience. Expressionist theater, with its fragmented narratives and distorted sets, challenged the conventions of naturalism and realism, offering a more abstract and emotional portrayal of human conflict. In cinema, German expressionist filmmakers, such as F.W. Murnau and Fritz Lang, introduced innovative visual techniques, including distorted set designs and chiaroscuro lighting, which created a psychological intensity that still resonates in horror and thriller films today. Moreover, Expressionism also had a philosophical dimension, influencing intellectual movements like existentialism. The themes of alienation, anxiety, and the search for meaning in a seemingly indifferent world resonated with thinkers like Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus, who explored similar questions about the human condition. Expressionism's rejection of idealized or naturalistic portrayals of life and its focus on subjective experience anticipated many of the existential themes that would dominate 20th century thought. Ultimately, Expressionism's role in society and culture was profound. It provided a means for artists and intellectuals to engage with the complexities of modern existence, offering both a mirror to society's disillusionment and a space for introspection. By confronting the anxieties and emotional depths of modern life, Expressionism contributed to the development of more nuanced, complex art and thought, shaping the trajectory of modern culture and leaving an enduring legacy that continues to influence contemporary art, cinema, and philosophy. Expressionism as a reaction to modernity. Expressionism emerged as a direct response to the rapidly changing world of the early 20th century, a period marked by industrialization, urbanization, and the psychological upheaval following World War I. As society moved away from traditional structures and embraced modernity, many individuals experienced a profound sense of alienation, anxiety, and disillusionment. Expressionism, with its focus on subjective experience and emotional intensity, sought to capture and represent these feelings, presenting an unvarnished view of the human condition in an increasingly fragmented and chaotic world. The rapid pace of industrialization and urban growth created a sense of dislocation for many people. As rural areas were replaced by sprawling, impersonal cities, individuals found themselves disconnected from both nature and community. This sense of alienation was exacerbated by the horrors of the First World War, which shattered long-held beliefs about the progress of civilization and the inherent goodness of humanity. Expressionism emerged as a reaction to this turmoil, offering an emotional and psychological counterpoint to the sanitized, idealized depictions of modern life that were often found in academic or commercial art. Rather than representing reality in a neutral or realistic way, Expressionist artists sought to reveal the emotional and psychological depths of the human experience, often depicting the world as a distorted and exaggerated reflection of the inner turmoil of the individual. The emphasis in Expressionism was on conveying internal experience over external reality. Artists and writers used distorted, exaggerated forms and chaotic compositions to reflect the psychological distress and existential crises that many individuals felt in the face of modernity. In visual art, this meant the use of bold colors, jagged lines, and abstract shapes to evoke powerful emotional responses. In literature and theater, Expressionist writers focused on the inner lives of their characters, portraying themes of alienation, madness, and moral decay in response to an increasingly mechanized and dehumanizing world. The works of playwrights like Georg Kaiser and novelists like Franz Kafka exemplified this exploration of the psychological landscape, capturing the emotional fragmentation that modernity seemed to impose on individuals. At its core, Expressionism was an attempt to make sense of the modern world by confronting its darkest and most disorienting aspects. It rejected the notion that art should merely reflect the surface of society, instead opting to explore the subjective, often irrational forces that shaped human behavior. By focusing on the emotional and psychological dimensions of modern life, Expressionism gave voice to the anxieties and existential dilemmas that many people felt in the face of rapid social and technological change. In this way, Expressionism functioned as both a critique of modernity and a means of coping with its overwhelming complexities, offering a powerful artistic response to a world in flux. Social and political themes in Expressionist art. Expressionism was not only an aesthetic movement, but also a reaction to the social and political upheavals of the early 20th century. At its core, Expressionist art sought to express the emotional and psychological distress caused by modernity, war, and the alienation of individuals in an increasingly industrialized world. Through distorted forms, intense color palettes, and exaggerated emotional expression, Expressionist artists highlighted the deep social and political tensions of their time, often using their work to critique societal structures and reveal the darker aspects of human experience. One of the central themes in Expressionist art was the alienation and disillusionment caused by rapid industrialization and urbanization. As cities grew and industrialization spread, individuals felt increasingly disconnected from both nature and community, often becoming just another cog in the mechanized wheel of modern society. Expressionist artists, such as Ernst Ludwig Kirchner and Edvard Munch, used their work to explore this sense of isolation. In paintings like Kirchner's Street Berlin, 1913, the crowded, chaotic urban environment is depicted in a way that highlights the alienation felt by individuals in the modern city. Figures are isolated, their faces devoid of emotion, conveying the emotional numbness that results from living in a world dominated by industrial progress and social fragmentation. Another important social theme in Expressionism was the dehumanizing effects of war, particularly World War I. The devastation and trauma caused by the war left many individuals grappling with existential questions about the meaning and purpose of life. Expressionist art responded to this collective trauma by confronting the brutal realities of war, often portraying the horrors and psychological scars it left on soldiers and civilians alike. In works like Otto Dix's The Trench, 1924, the violence and mutilation of war are starkly represented, offering a grim commentary on the human cost of conflict. For many Expressionist artists, war was not just a political event, but a devastating psychological experience that shattered the illusions of progress and humanity. Additionally, Expressionism often reflected political tensions, particularly in post-World War I Europe. With the rise of fascism and political instability, artists used their work to critique the status quo and highlight the growing authoritarian tendencies in society. The movement's focus on individual suffering and emotional expression resonated with the political climate of the time, as many artists sought to expose the alienation and powerlessness felt by ordinary people under oppressive regimes. Through their work, Expressionists sought to challenge political structures that they felt suppressed the individual and stifled authentic human experience. In conclusion, Expressionist art was deeply intertwined with the social and political issues of its time. It served as both a reflection and critique of the rapidly changing world, exploring themes of alienation, the horrors of war, and the dehumanizing effects of industrialization and political oppression. By using emotional intensity and distorted forms to express these themes, Expressionist artists created a powerful visual language that continues to resonate with contemporary audiences as a reminder of the darker sides of modernity. Expressionism's reflection on war, trauma, and crisis. Expressionism emerged as a powerful response to the profound societal and psychological upheavals of the early 20th century, with war, trauma, and crisis serving as central themes in the movement. The brutality and senselessness of World War I deeply influenced Expressionist artists who sought to depict the emotional and psychological scars left by the conflict. In a world ravaged by war, individuals were confronted with a reality that seemed increasingly chaotic and fragmented, leading Expressionist artists to explore the trauma of war and the crisis of human identity and morality. The trauma of war, particularly the devastating impact of World War I, became a key subject in Expressionist art. The war had a profound effect on the collective consciousness, as it shattered the illusions of progress and rationality that had dominated European thought. Artists began to portray not just the physical destruction of war, but also the emotional and psychological toll it took on individuals. The emotional intensity of Expressionism allowed artists to explore the trauma and suffering of soldiers, civilians, and the broader society in a raw and unflinching way. Works such as Otto Dix's The Trench, 1924, and George Gross's Pillars of Society, 1926, vividly depicted the physical and moral devastation caused by the war, with grotesque and distorted imagery that emphasized the horrors of violence and the psychological impact of trauma. Beyond the immediate aftermath of the war, Expressionist art also reflected a broader sense of crisis in the wake of global conflict. The war created a sense of existential uncertainty as people struggled to make sense of a world that had been torn apart by violence and political instability. Expressionist works often reflected the psychological fragmentation and alienation that individuals experienced in the wake of such crises. Figures in many Expressionist paintings appear distorted, isolated, and anguished, suggesting a deep sense of inner turmoil and disorientation. This emotional fragmentation mirrored the broader societal crisis as people grappled with questions of meaning, identity, and morality in a world that seemed increasingly hostile and indifferent. Furthermore, the themes of trauma and crisis in Expressionism were not limited to war alone, but extended to a broader critique of the dehumanizing effects of modernity. Industrialization, urbanization, and the rapid pace of technological change also contributed to feelings of alienation and anxiety. Artists like Ernst Ludwig Kirchner and Egon Schiele depicted individuals struggling to maintain a sense of self in the face of overwhelming societal forces, portraying a sense of vulnerability and crisis in the modern world. In sum, Expressionism's reflection on war, trauma, and crisis offers a stark portrayal of the emotional and psychological toll of modern life, particularly in the wake of the devastation wrought by World War I. Through distorted, intense imagery and a focus on inner emotional states, Expressionist artists provided a window into the suffering and alienation experienced by individuals in a world that had been irrevocably changed by war and crisis. This exploration of trauma remains a powerful and poignant aspect of the movement, as it continues to resonate with audiences grappling with the effects of violence and conflict in the contemporary world. The cultural legacy of Expressionism. Expressionism, as a cultural movement, left a profound and lasting legacy that continues to shape a wide range of artistic disciplines, from visual art to literature, theater, film, and beyond. Emerging in the early 20th century as a response to the alienation, trauma, and existential anxiety of modern life, Expressionism sought to convey raw emotional truths and psychological depth, challenging traditional conventions and creating new avenues for self-expression. Its impact resonates today, influencing contemporary art and culture in ways that reflect both the movement's transformative role in its own time and its enduring relevance. In visual art, Expressionism pushed boundaries by breaking free from the constraints of realism and embracing abstraction, distortion, and exaggerated emotional intensity. It not only gave voice to individual struggles, but also paved the way for future movements, particularly abstract expressionism in the mid-20th century. Artists like Jackson Pollock and Willem de Kooning drew on the emotional freedom and psychological focus of Expressionism to develop a new visual language that prioritized emotional expression over technical accuracy. Expressionism also influenced modern and contemporary artists such as Edvard Munch, Egon Schiele, and more recently, artists like Anselm Kiefer and Tracey Emin, whose works often explore themes of alienation, identity, and the human condition, deeply rooted in the legacy of Expressionism. In literature, Expressionism radically transformed the narrative landscape, particularly in the realm of modern drama. Playwrights like Georg Kaiser, August Strindberg, and Bertolt Brecht embraced the movement's focus on emotional and psychological intensity, often depicting characters grappling with alienation, existential crises, and societal breakdowns. Expressionist theater aimed to break away from naturalism and realism, emphasizing symbolic, nonlinear storytelling and a heightened emotional atmosphere. This approach had a significant influence on the development of modern theater, laying the foundation for later avant-garde and experimental works, and inspiring playwrights such as Samuel Beckett and Harold Pinter. Expressionism also found its way into film, particularly in German cinema during the 1920s, where directors like F.W. Murnau, Fritz Lang, and Robert Wiene used visual techniques such as distorted sets, chiaroscuro lighting, and surreal imagery to explore psychological themes and create a sense of emotional and existential unease. German expressionist cinema, most notably in films like Nosferatu, 1922, and The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, 1920, had a profound impact on the horror genre, influencing filmmakers like Alfred Hitchcock and Tim Burton, and shaping the aesthetic of modern thriller and horror films. Beyond the arts, Expressionism's legacy extended to philosophy, psychology, and cultural theory, influencing thinkers such as Jean-Paul Sartre and Friedrich Nietzsche. whose works explore themes of existentialism and the individual's search for meaning in an often absurd and alienating world. Expressionism's focus on subjective experience, inner emotional states, and the exploration of human consciousness opened new doors for understanding the complexity of human existence, helping to shape the intellectual discourse of the 20th century. In conclusion, the cultural legacy of Expressionism is vast and far-reaching, influencing not only the arts, but also the way we understand and confront the psychological and emotional challenges of modern life. Through its exploration of alienation, trauma, and the human condition, Expressionism remains an enduring force in shaping both artistic expression and cultural discourse in the contemporary world. Chapter 8: The Therapeutic Power of Expressionist Art. Expressionism, with its raw emotional intensity and focus on the inner workings of the human psyche, has long been recognized not only as an artistic movement, but also as a form of therapy. The expressive and often cathartic nature of expressionist art provides a space for individuals to confront and release emotions that might otherwise remain suppressed. Through its vivid portrayal of emotional experiences, Expressionism offers both artists and viewers a therapeutic outlet, allowing them to process trauma, explore psychological depths, and experience healing through the act of creation or contemplation. One of the most powerful therapeutic aspects of Expressionism is its emphasis on the expression of inner turmoil and emotional conflict. Unlike traditional forms of art that aim to depict the external world with clarity and precision, Expressionism focused on conveying internal states through distorted imagery, intense color, and exaggerated forms. This approach allows individuals to externalize and visualize complex emotions such as fear, grief, anxiety, and despair, which can be difficult to articulate or confront directly. The freedom to distort, exaggerate, or abstract reality enables both artists and viewers to explore feelings that might be overwhelming or too painful to express in words, offering a form of emotional release and self-reflection. In the context of art therapy, Expressionism has been used as a tool to help individuals access and express deep-seated emotions. Art therapists often use expressive techniques, such as freeform painting, drawing, and sculpting, to help clients uncover repressed memories or emotions, allowing them to engage with difficult psychological material in a safe and controlled environment. The act of creating expressive, non-representational art allows for a kind of symbolic catharsis, where individuals can project their inner conflicts onto the canvas and, through the act of creation, gain insight and emotional relief. This process is especially beneficial for individuals dealing with trauma, depression, or anxiety, as it provides a nonverbal means of processing complex psychological issues. Expressionism's therapeutic potential extends beyond the therapeutic setting and into the realm of art appreciation. Viewing expressionist art, with its vivid depictions of human suffering and emotional intensity, allows audiences to confront their own emotional struggles in a reflective manner. For example, works like Edvard Munch's The Scream or Egon Schiele's Anguished Self-Portraits invite viewers to engage with the artist's emotional world, creating a sense of shared experience. In this way, expressionist art serves not only as a mirror to individual emotional states, but also as a collective space for emotional connection, helping individuals feel understood and less isolated in their own struggles. In conclusion, the therapeutic power of expressionist art lies in its ability to bridge the emotional and psychological divide, offering both creators and viewers a means of processing and confronting the complexities of the human experience. Through its bold use of emotion, color, and form, Expressionism provides a platform for healing, self-discovery, and emotional expression, making it a vital tool for psychological growth and well-being. The role of Expressionism in art therapy. Expressionism plays a significant role in the field of art therapy, offering a unique and potent approach to emotional healing and psychological growth. By focusing on the artist's inner emotional world rather than external appearances, Expressionism provides a means for individuals to explore and process their feelings, often allowing for cathartic release and self-understanding. The distorted and intense forms that define Expressionist art offer a language for expressing complex emotions such as anxiety, fear, anger, grief, and trauma, making it a valuable tool in therapeutic contexts. In art therapy, one of the central goals is to create a safe space where individuals can externalize their emotions and experiences in a nonverbal way. For many, words may not suffice to communicate the depth of their feelings, especially when dealing with trauma or deeply entrenched psychological issues. Expressionism, with its emphasis on emotional exaggeration and abstraction, offers a visual language that allows individuals to project their inner struggles onto the canvas, bypassing the limitations of verbal communication. This expressive act of creation can help people to confront, explore, and better understand their emotions in a way that is often more direct and immediate than traditional talk therapy. The use of bold colors, distorted shapes, and chaotic forms can also mirror the internal chaos that some individuals experience. For example, someone dealing with trauma or anxiety may feel overwhelmed by intense, unmanageable emotions. Through the process of creating expressionist art, they can externalize these feelings and gain a sense of control over them. This act of visualization can lead to emotional relief, as it allows the person to confront their fears or struggles in a tangible way. In some cases, it even helps individuals to integrate fragmented parts of themselves, leading to greater psychological coherence and self-acceptance. Art therapists often encourage clients to use expressionist techniques to explore their unconscious or repressed material. The distortion and abstraction in expressionist works can facilitate the uncovering of suppressed emotions or unresolved issues, offering new insights into the self. For instance, individuals struggling with unresolved grief or trauma might be guided to depict their feelings through exaggerated figures or chaotic scenes, helping them to confront and process the emotions that have been hidden or buried. Furthermore, the act of creating art in the expressionist style fosters a deeper connection to one's own emotional landscape. It encourages individuals to trust their instincts, abandon perfectionism, and embrace vulnerability. This process can promote emotional healing by enabling individuals to express themselves freely without fear of judgment. In conclusion, Expressionism's role in art therapy is invaluable, as it provides both a medium for emotional release and a tool for personal insight. By tapping into the raw emotional core of an individual's experiences, Expressionist art encourages self-expression, fosters healing, and allows people to work through psychological challenges in a deeply transformative way. Using art to confront and process emotional trauma. Art has long been recognized as a powerful tool for confronting and processing emotional trauma, providing individuals with a nonverbal outlet for complex feelings that can be difficult to express through words. In the context of trauma, art offers a safe space to explore, externalize, and make sense of overwhelming emotions, allowing individuals to take ownership of their healing process. The act of creating art can serve as a form of emotional release, helping trauma survivors navigate their experiences and integrate their pain into their broader sense of self. Trauma, particularly when it is deep-seated or repressed, can be challenging to verbalize. Survivors often struggle with feelings of isolation or disconnection, finding it hard to articulate the psychological and emotional wounds that haunt them. Artistic expression, particularly through mediums like painting, drawing, and sculpture, allows for an exploration of these emotions in a direct and instinctive way. The act of creating art provides a means for individuals to externalize their inner turmoil and transform it into something tangible, offering relief from the overwhelming and often paralyzing nature of trauma. In many ways, art can function as a bridge between the conscious and unconscious mind. When working through trauma, individuals may access parts of themselves that are not readily available through rational thought. This can be especially true in expressive forms like expressionism, where the emphasis is placed on emotion, instinct, and inner experiences. The freedom to distort or abstract reality provides a pathway to uncover repressed memories or feelings that are otherwise too painful to confront directly. Artists can explore their trauma through the manipulation of color, form, and symbolism, creating works that reflect their deepest emotional truths. These images can then be examined and processed, offering an opportunity for catharsis and self-reflection. Art also provides an important sense of agency and control in the healing process. For trauma survivors, who often feel powerless or disconnected from their emotions, creating art offers a way to regain control over their narrative. By giving form to their emotional experiences, individuals can make sense of what they have endured and reclaim ownership over their personal stories. This creative process can be deeply empowering, as it allows survivors to reshape their relationship with the trauma they have experienced. Moreover, viewing and reflecting on art created during the healing process can further facilitate emotional recovery. Art therapy often encourages individuals to revisit and reflect upon their creations, allowing for deeper insights into the emotional and psychological wounds that may have previously been inaccessible. As survivors explore the meanings behind their art, they may uncover new pathways to understanding and healing. In conclusion, using art to confront and process emotional trauma offers individuals an invaluable means of expression, healing, and empowerment. The act of creating or viewing art provides a therapeutic outlet for deep-seated emotions, facilitating emotional release and self-exploration. Through this process, individuals can begin to integrate their trauma into their personal narrative, ultimately moving toward greater emotional resilience and healing. Expressionism in healing and personal growth. Expressionism has proven to be a powerful tool in both healing and personal growth, offering individuals a means to explore and transform deep-seated emotions. Its focus on intense emotional expression, distortion, and abstraction provides a therapeutic avenue for confronting personal challenges, trauma, and existential questions. Through its visual language of vivid colors, exaggerated forms, and symbolic imagery, Expressionism fosters self-exploration, helping individuals uncover the complexities of their inner world and facilitating emotional healing. In therapeutic contexts, Expressionism allows individuals to process complex emotions that might be difficult to verbalize. For many, particularly those who have experienced trauma or are struggling with mental health issues, traditional forms of communication may feel limiting or insufficient. Art becomes an essential alternative for expressing feelings that are too overwhelming or intangible to articulate. By externalizing emotions through artistic creation, individuals gain a sense of control over their feelings and can begin to confront them without being overwhelmed. The expressive act of painting, drawing, or sculpting provides a nonverbal release that can be profoundly cathartic, allowing for emotional release and self-regulation. The process of creating expressionist art also promotes personal growth by encouraging individuals to engage with their emotions in a direct and unfiltered way. In a world where societal expectations often suppress emotional vulnerability, Expressionism invites individuals to reconnect with their authentic selves. The distortion and abstraction inherent in Expressionism reflect the chaos, confusion, and rawness of the human experience, offering individuals permission to express emotions freely, without judgment. This process fosters a deeper understanding of oneself, cultivating greater self-acceptance and emotional awareness. Moreover, Expressionism can also serve as a tool for self-discovery and transformation. When individuals create or interact with emotionally charged artwork, they are often forced to confront unresolved feelings, memories, or aspects of their identity that have been pushed aside or suppressed. By bringing these feelings to the surface, they are given the opportunity to heal and grow. As the individual engages in this process of exploration, they can gain new perspectives, develop coping mechanisms, and ultimately achieve greater emotional resilience. Personal growth through expressionism is not limited to the therapeutic setting. It extends into everyday life as well. Individuals who embrace the expressive qualities of art often find that it enhances their emotional intelligence, problem-solving abilities, and self-expression in other areas of their lives. Whether through art, writing, or other creative endeavors, embracing emotional expression fosters a mindset of openness, growth, and transformation, which can have profound effects on one's personal development and relationships. In conclusion, expressionism provides a powerful means for healing and personal growth. By facilitating emotional release, encouraging self-exploration, and promoting authenticity, it offers individuals the tools to confront their deepest emotions, uncover hidden aspects of themselves, and move toward emotional wholeness. In this way, expressionism serves as both a therapeutic tool and a path to greater personal understanding and transformation. Case studies in art therapy. Art therapy has become an increasingly important tool in the treatment of various psychological issues, with numerous case studies highlighting its effectiveness in helping individuals work through trauma, depression, anxiety, and other emotional struggles. Through creative expression, patients are given the opportunity to explore their feelings in a nonverbal way, making the therapeutic process both accessible and deeply personal. Several case studies illustrate the profound impact that art therapy can have on emotional healing and personal growth. One case study that stands out involves a young woman named Emma who had experienced severe trauma due to childhood abuse. During her sessions with an art therapist, Emma struggled to express the depth of her pain verbally. However, through the process of creating art, she was able to externalize her emotions. She began with chaotic and dark abstract paintings that mirrored her inner turmoil. Over time, her artwork began to shift, with lighter colors and more fluid forms emerging. This transformation in her art mirrored her journey toward emotional healing. As Emma reflected on her artwork with the therapist, she gained insight into the ways in which the trauma had shaped her sense of self and began to reconnect with her sense of agency. The process of creating art became a means for her to process and release deep-seated emotions, allowing her to eventually work through the trauma that had previously been too overwhelming to confront. Another case study involves a middle-aged man named John, who had been struggling with anxiety and depression following a difficult divorce. John's art therapy sessions began with his reluctance to engage, as he initially believed that art was not a real therapeutic tool. However, after some gentle encouragement, he began to experiment with drawing and painting. Through his artwork, John was able to visually express the isolation and sadness he felt, but had been unable to express in conversation. As he delved deeper into his art, he began to explore the relationship between his emotions and his sense of identity. One key piece in particular, a self-portrait that initially depicted him as fragmented and shadowed, became a pivotal moment in his therapy. This image served as a mirror to his internal struggles, and through reflecting on it, he was able to begin reconciling the parts of himself that felt broken. Over time, John's use of color and form became more hopeful and expressive, reflecting his progress toward emotional recovery. A third case study involves a teenager named Sarah, who was dealing with severe social anxiety and low self-esteem. Sarah had difficulty forming connections with her peers and often felt alienated. In her art therapy sessions, she began creating pieces that depicted herself as small and overshadowed, symbolizing her feelings of invisibility. Through the act of creating these works, she was able to examine the roots of her anxiety and recognize the patterns that fueled her feelings of isolation. As Sarah's art became more introspective, she began to experiment with more positive self-imagery, eventually creating vibrant, expressive portraits of herself that reflected confidence and strength. This shift in her artwork mirrored her growing sense of self-worth and ability to engage with others in a more confident way. In conclusion, Case studies in art therapy provide valuable insights into how creative expression can facilitate healing, emotional exploration, and personal growth. Whether addressing trauma, anxiety, or self-esteem issues, art therapy provides a nonverbal pathway for individuals to process their emotions and experiences, helping them to gain clarity, self-awareness, and healing through artistic creation. These case studies highlight the transformative power of art in therapeutic settings, illustrating how art therapy can be a powerful tool for emotional recovery and personal development. Chapter 9: The Lasting Influence of Expressionism. Expressionism, with its bold departure from realism and its focus on raw emotion and subjective experience, has left an enduring legacy across various fields of art, culture, and society. Emerging in the early 20th century, it revolutionized how we view and interpret human emotion, societal turmoil, and individual identity. Though the movement itself was rooted in a particular historical and cultural moment, its influence has endured far beyond its initial period of prominence, continuing to shape art, literature, theater, film, and even psychology today. In visual arts, Expressionism's impact is profound. Artists such as Edvard Munch, Egon Schiele, and Wassily Kandinsky reshaped the artistic landscape with their emotive use of color, form, and texture. Their work has influenced generations of artists who continue to explore themes of personal anguish, alienation, and the inner human psyche. Expressionism also paved the way for movements like abstract expressionism in the mid-20th century, with figures like Jackson Pollock and Mark Rothko drawing on the emotive qualities of their predecessors, but pushing the boundaries of abstraction further. Even contemporary artists, whether in painting, sculpture, or mixed media, often find themselves returning to the core principles of Expressionism, including the emphasis on raw emotional expression over technical precision. In literature, Expressionism has also left a lasting mark, especially in the realms of theater and poetry. The existential themes explored by writers such as Franz Kafka, August Strindberg, and Georg Kaiser continue to resonate in modern narratives. Kafka's surreal exploration of alienation and bureaucratic absurdity, for example, remains a touchstone for contemporary writers grappling with similar themes in an increasingly fragmented world. In theater, the break from traditional realism in favor of more abstract and symbolic representations of the human condition laid the foundation for experimental theater in the 20th and 21st centuries. Playwrights like Samuel Beckett, with his bleak, existential plays, and others involved in the theater of the absurd, owe a debt to the Expressionist tradition. Expressionism's influence extends to film as well, particularly in German cinema during the 1920s. Films like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari and Nosferatu used exaggerated set designs, distorted perspectives, and stark lighting to visually represent psychological tension and emotional extremes. These films laid the groundwork for later cinematic genres, including film noir and psychological thrillers, which similarly explore the darker aspects of human nature through visual and narrative distortion. The influence of Expressionism can also be seen in modern filmmakers such as Tim Burton and David Lynch, whose works continue to engage with the surreal, the uncanny, and the exploration of complex psychological landscapes. Beyond the arts, Expressionism has left an indelible mark on the field of psychology, particularly in the study of emotional expression and the therapeutic process. Its emphasis on confronting raw emotions, often through art, has shaped approaches to art therapy and psychological healing. As society continues to grapple with issues of mental health, Expressionism's focus on individual experience and emotional depth remains a relevant and vital lens through which we understand and process the complexities of the human condition. In conclusion, Expressionism's influence endures, not just as a historical movement, but as a living force that continues to shape and inspire across the arts and beyond. Its emotional power, focus on subjective reality, and exploration of the human psyche remain vital tools for understanding and expressing the complexities of the modern world. Whether through painting, literature, theater, film, or therapy, Expressionism's legacy endures, reminding us of the profound emotional depth that art can convey and the lasting power of the human spirit. Expressionism's continued relevance in contemporary art. Expressionism remains a powerful force in contemporary art. Its emotional intensity, focus on individual experience, and rejection of realism resonating deeply with artists and audiences today. Though the movement emerged in the early 20th century, its core principles, such as the prioritization of emotion over technique and the desire to explore the inner workings of the human psyche, continue to influence modern art practices across the globe. The relevance of Expressionism today is evident in the ways it informs contemporary themes of identity, social justice, and mental health, while also encouraging a more fluid, experimental approach to artistic creation. In contemporary art, the emotional depth that characterized early Expressionism has evolved into new forms of self-expression. Today's artists, like those before them, seek to reflect the complexities of modern life with a focus on identity, trauma, and societal fragmentation. Artists such as Tracy Emin, Jean-Michel Basquiat, and Kara Walker use raw, unrefined imagery to address contemporary social and psychological issues, much in the same way that Expressionist artists sought to confront the personal and societal crises of their time. Emin's work, for example, employs a highly personal language of memory and pain, with a sense of vulnerability that echoes the emotional intensity of the Expressionist movement. Basquiat's bold, fragmented works and powerful use of symbolism resonate with Expressionism's focus on raw, untamed emotion. Furthermore, the continued influence of Expressionism can be seen in the way contemporary artists explore the human condition through abstract and distorted forms. Abstract painters like Mark Bradford and Cecily Brown use powerful color fields and chaotic textures to evoke emotional experiences and grapple with the dissonance of modern existence. These artists, while removed from the specific context of early 20th century Expressionism, still embrace the movement's focus on the subjective and psychological aspects of human experience. The expressive brushwork and vibrant colors of their work reflect an ongoing engagement with the human psyche, much like the works of Wassily Kandinsky or Ernst Ludwig Kirchner. Expressionism also remains a key influence in performance art and installation pieces. Artists like Marina Abramovich and Chris Burden push boundaries with their work, using their bodies and immersive environments to challenge both themselves and their audience emotionally. These performances are often deeply personal, exploring themes of pain, vulnerability, and identity, much as Expressionism did through its focus on intense emotion and personal subjectivity. In doing so, these artists continue the Expressionist legacy of breaking down the boundaries between the artist, the work, and the audience. In the realm of digital art, the enduring influence of Expressionism is also evident, with artists experimenting with new media to create emotionally charged, immersive experiences. Digital art allows for the distortion of space and time, enabling artists to manipulate images and sounds in ways that evoke deep emotional responses, much like early Expressionist works did. In conclusion, Expressionism's impact on contemporary art is undeniable. The movement's exploration of raw emotion, individual subjectivity, and the psychological experience continues to resonate with artists and audiences in today's world. Whether through painting, performance, or digital media, the emotional intensity and transformative power of Expressionism remains relevant, encouraging new generations of artists to explore the complexities of the human experience through creative expression. The influence on modern and postmodern art. The influence of Expressionism on modern and postmodern art is profound and far-reaching, shaping many of the movements and artistic practices that followed its emergence in the early 20th century. Expressionism's emphasis on emotional intensity, subjective experience, and the exploration of the human psyche laid the foundation for numerous developments in both modern and postmodern art. While Expressionism itself was a reaction against the strict formalism of previous art traditions, it opened up new possibilities for experimentation, abstraction, and personal expression that continue to shape contemporary art today. In the context of modern art, Expressionism played a pivotal role in the development of abstraction. Artists such as Wassily Kandinsky, who was deeply influenced by the emotional and psychological dimensions of Expressionism, moved towards a more abstract approach to convey inner feelings rather than external realities. This shift paved the way for later abstract movements, such as abstract expressionism in the 1940s and 1950s, which was championed by artists like Jackson Pollock and Mark Rothko. Abstract expressionism, while distinct in its use of abstraction, retained the emphasis on emotional immediacy and spontaneous expression that was central to early expressionism. The raw energy and unrestrained brushwork of Pollock's drip paintings, for example, reflect the same concerns with subjective experience and emotional truth that defined expressionism. Postmodern art, with its focus on deconstruction, irony, and pastiche, was also influenced by Expressionism, though in a more complex and sometimes contradictory way. The emotional intensity of Expressionism was often reinterpreted in postmodern works through a lens of skepticism or irony. Artists in the postmodern era, such as Jean-Michel Basquiat and David Sal, continued to draw on the visual language of Expressionism, but incorporated elements of popular culture, graffiti, and fragmented narratives. This blending of high and low culture, along with a self-aware approach to artistic creation, mirrors the Expressionist tradition's willingness to break away from traditional artistic forms in favor of more direct, emotional expression. In addition to these direct influences, Expressionism's challenge to realism and its embrace of distortion, abstraction, and subjective truth paved the way for a broader range of artistic exploration in postmodernism. The blurring of boundaries between different media, painting, sculpture, performance art, and installation, can be traced back to the liberating spirit of Expressionism, which rejected the constraints of conventional artistic expression in favor of more personal and emotional representations of the world. Moreover, the themes of alienation, anxiety, and social fragmentation that were central to Expressionism continue to resonate in modern and postmodern art. As the world became increasingly complex and fragmented, artists turned to Expressionist ideas to explore the psychological effects of modern life, war, technology, and cultural shifts. This ongoing engagement with the human condition through emotional and often distorted imagery reflects the lasting power of Expressionism as a lens through which artists explore identity, trauma, and societal issues. In conclusion, Expressionism's influence on both modern and postmodern art is undeniable. Its focus on emotional expression, the subjective experience, and the exploration of the inner psyche provided a framework for later artistic movements that embraced abstraction, fragmentation, and experimentation. The legacy of Expressionism continues to be felt in contemporary art, as artists continue to grapple with the complexities of the human experience through expressive and often unconventional means. Expressionism's psychological and emotional legacy. Expressionism's psychological and emotional legacy remains a powerful force in both the arts and the broader cultural landscape, continuing to shape how we understand human emotions, mental health, and the complexities of the psyche. The movement's core focus on internal emotional experience, rather than external reality, has had lasting implications for the way artists and thinkers approach the human mind, trauma, and psychological states. Its emphasis on raw, often exaggerated emotion was a reaction against the rationalism of the time, and this rebellious spirit of confronting the inner world head-on continues to resonate deeply in contemporary art, literature, theater, and psychology. At its core, Expressionism offered a new way to represent psychological states. Artists and writers within the movement sought to capture the turmoil, anxiety, and alienation that marked modern life, often distorting or exaggerating their subjects to reflect these intense inner experiences. The psychological underpinnings of this distortion laid the groundwork for future explorations of the mind, particularly in surrealism and later abstract art, where the unconscious and the irrational took center stage. The psychological tension and emotional volatility of expressionist art have continued to inspire artists who explore the complexities of identity, trauma, and personal expression, reflecting the enduring power of emotion as a tool for artistic creation. The influence of expressionism extended beyond the art world into psychology itself, especially in the realms of art therapy and psychoanalysis. Its focus on unfiltered emotional expression paved the way for the development of art therapy as a means of helping individuals process trauma, explore their inner worlds, and express feelings that might otherwise be difficult to articulate. The rawness of expressionist art mirrored the therapeutic process of confronting uncomfortable truths, allowing for emotional release and healing. In a similar vein, psychoanalysts like Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung, who explored the unconscious mind and its impact on behavior, found parallels in the emotive, often irrational expressions of artists like Edvard Munch and Ernst Ludwig Kirchner. Moreover, expressionism's psychological legacy can be seen in its exploration of the human condition, particularly in relation to existential crises, anxiety, and alienation. Themes of isolation and societal dislocation, which were central to expressionist works, have been central to modern and postmodern thought, reflecting the ongoing struggle to understand the self in a fragmented world. These themes continue to inform contemporary art, literature, and cinema, where artists explore the psychological ramifications of a rapidly changing society. In conclusion, Expressionism's psychological and emotional legacy has had a profound impact on how we approach the inner workings of the mind, both artistically and therapeutically. By emphasizing the importance of raw emotional expression and the exploration of psychological states, Expressionism provided a powerful framework for understanding and depicting the complexities of human emotions, trauma, and personal identity. Its influence continues to shape contemporary discussions of mental health and artistic expression, serving as a vital tool for self-exploration and societal reflection. The ongoing impact on mental health awareness. The influence of Expressionism on mental health awareness has been significant, offering a deep and emotive lens through which to explore the complexities of the human psyche. By prioritizing intense emotional expression and delving into themes of alienation, anxiety, and existential despair, Expressionism provided an early framework for understanding mental health struggles that were often ignored or stigmatized in society. The movement's raw portrayal of psychological distress opened up new conversations about the human condition and the emotional turbulence many individuals experience, helping to destigmatize mental health and highlight its importance in art, culture, and psychology. One of Expressionism's key contributions to mental health awareness is its focus on personal emotional expression as a form of communication. By breaking free from traditional representational art and using distorted, exaggerated imagery, Expressionist artists depicted the often hidden psychological struggles of the human experience. Works like Edvard Munch's The Scream or Egon Schiele's raw, vulnerable portraits speak to inner turmoil in a way that is not just visual, but deeply emotional. These depictions have created an ongoing dialogue around the visibility of mental health issues, encouraging individuals to confront their feelings and acknowledge the complex nature of emotional pain. The willingness of these artists to showcase vulnerability has played a significant role in helping people understand that mental health issues are universal and worth discussing openly. In the realm of art therapy, Expressionism's focus on emotional release through creative expression has been instrumental. As art therapy developed throughout the 20th century, it drew heavily on Expressionism's belief in the therapeutic potential of visual art to process and express deep, often unconscious emotions. By embracing the emotional and psychological aspects of art, therapists have been able to help individuals work through trauma, anxiety, and depression. Expressionist art's emphasis on personal experience and emotion encourages participants to break away from traditional norms of artistic representation and instead focus on their emotional truth. This process has proven particularly beneficial for people who struggle with verbal expression, allowing them to externalize their feelings in a safe, non-judgmental environment. Furthermore, Expressionism's themes of isolation, existential angst, and alienation continue to be relevant to contemporary discussions around mental health. The movement anticipated the psychological struggles faced by modern individuals, many of whom grapple with feelings of disconnection in a rapidly changing, often overwhelming world. By giving voice to these feelings of unease and dislocation, Expressionism's impact is felt in the ongoing exploration of mental health in literature, film, and other artistic media. Today's artists, filmmakers, and writers often look to Expressionism's depiction of psychological distress as a model for conveying the complexities of mental health and emotional experience, helping to raise awareness and foster empathy for those who struggle with mental health challenges. In conclusion, the ongoing impact of Expressionism on mental health awareness cannot be overstated. Through its emotional depth, vulnerability, and exploration of psychological turmoil, Expressionism has paved the way for more open discussions about mental health. Its legacy continues to shape how we understand, approach, and treat mental health issues, encouraging both artistic expression and empathy toward those who face psychological challenges. Chapter 10, Conclusion. In conclusion, Expressionism stands as one of the most emotionally potent and psychologically transformative movements in the history of art, leaving an indelible mark on not only the visual arts, but also literature, theater, film, and mental health awareness. Rooted in a deep exploration of the human condition, Expressionism's focus on raw emotion, personal experience, and psychological depth has influenced generations of artists and thinkers, inspiring new ways of seeing, feeling, and understanding the world around us. From its origins in early 20th century Europe to its lasting impact on contemporary art, the movement has provided a rich framework for both self-expression and societal reflection. The power of Expressionism lies in its ability to convey the complexities of human emotion. Whether through distorted forms, vivid colors, or abstract representations, Expressionist artists sought to reflect the inner workings of the mind, offering a window into the raw, unfiltered emotional states that define our existence. This commitment to emotional authenticity resonated deeply with audiences and continues to be a touchstone for artists seeking to communicate the often invisible struggles of the human psyche. Expressionism's legacy endures not only in the works of those who followed, but also in the ways it has shaped our collective understanding of mental health, personal identity, and the power of art to heal. Moreover, the movement's influence stretches far beyond its original boundaries, finding relevance in diverse forms of artistic expression, from literature to film and contemporary visual art. As the world became more fragmented and uncertain, the existential themes explored by Expressionist artists, alienation, anxiety, and the search for meaning, resonated more deeply with each passing generation. Expressionism continues to inspire modern and postmodern movements, where the emphasis on individual experience and emotional truth remains central to the creative process. The integration of expressionist techniques in art therapy has also created a lasting connection between art and mental health, with Expressionism offering a vehicle for emotional release and healing. As society grapples with increasingly complex issues, the ongoing relevance of Expressionism is evident in the continued exploration of its themes, especially the importance of confronting one's inner world and embracing the emotional complexities of life. Expressionism's emphasis on vulnerability, emotional expression, and psychological insight encourages a more empathetic, open-minded approach to mental health and human experience. It invites us to look beyond the surface, offering a deeper understanding of ourselves and others. Ultimately, Expressionism's impact on art, culture, and psychology is immeasurable. Its legacy serves as a reminder that the exploration of the emotional and psychological realms is not only vital to art, but essential to our understanding of the human experience. Through its bold and unapologetic approach to depicting emotion, Expressionism continues to inspire, heal, and provoke thought in ways that transcend time and place.